In his long career, he has established himself as a known Indian political thinker, more so as a public intellectual in the vernacular space, and more importantly, as a beloved and democratic teacher who attracts good number of students in his classes. Now, to today's discussion, Professor Gopalji Pradhan is professor at the School of Letters in Ambedkar University, Delhi. In his long career spanning 14 years, he has authored numerous books, including Navratna, Chayavad Yug Mein Sahityik Vaad Vivad, Chekhov, etc. And other translations for which he is also known include translations of On History by Eric Hobsbawm, Sociology by Tom Berkeley, interest in consciousness studies, philosophy of religion, philosophy of science and religion. He is currently working on the non-duality as it manifests in politics and philosophy in Sikhism. We then have Jayan Jigyasu. He is a doctoral student at the Center for Media Studies, School of Social Sciences, and he is currently working on public rhetorics and its publics here at CMS. Okay. Then we have Chetna Trivedi. She is a PhD candidate here at CPS. Her areas of interest include global history of governance and autonomy in higher education, politics of higher education, philosophy of higher education, and contemporary issues in political theory. Then my name is Supriya Ranjan. I am here a PhD candidate at the center, and my research interests include political violence, crime, and Indian politics. With this, I request Professor Thakur to just give us a brief snippet about the book, and then we can just begin the discussion.
Thank you, Supriya, and I'm not very happy with the category of being a vernacular in public intellectual. This word itself is very colonial, and I think that is one of the things that I want to oppose. But I'm really thankful to friends.
टॉप के लिए
101 है. I'm honored by the presence of my friends like Satish Jha and Professor from Hyderabad University, Hyderabad Institute. I'm really honored by the presence of the students, and I'm also nervous a little bit. And nervous because I think most of the things that I've written in the book has already been discussed with my friends and students. There's nothing new in this. And I'm not a writer. I'm a very reluctant writer, in fact. And I, quite for some time, I believed writing is a useless activity because it really alienates you from a lot of other social activities, including talking. I'm a talker. I would like to talk, and I want to continuously talk about things. It's not exactly the oral tradition, as people call it, but yes, I think talking is samvad. We are samvadi, basically. Professor Anand Kumar used to call me samvadi, that you are a samvadi. So I think that category I love to own. This book, as I keep repeating it, and I want to repeat it once again, is not, I mean, the name has to be there, therefore my name is there, but it is not my book. It is the collective project. In any case, knowledge is a collective project. The arrogance of claiming that the copyright belongs to the author is, I think, very capitalist, and this book has actually emerged as a text in this classroom. This class, since last 15, 16 years, I have been talking about. When I came to JNU, I took two places. One that I will write in Hindi, and two that I will talk about Indian intellectual traditions. Why did I decide that? Hindi gradually, not because I'm a Hindi wala, as my friend Satish keeps calling people, but Hindi chauvinist. I'm not a Hindi chauvinist. I think language should not be a part of the structure of domination. It's a carrier of knowledge. And in whichever language we are comfortable, we should be writing on that. I was convinced after coming here by Professor Guru's argument that the elites use language to humiliate subaltern. And you remember his article, How Egalitarian are Social Sciences. And also I'm thankful to CPS, which was very arrogant, and let me acknowledge that, which was very arrogant on the issue of language. And I will not narrate the story, which is not a beautiful story for this audience. But generally, I have faced students coming from different centers of JNU, fully humiliated due to their linguistic skill. And that forced me to start a magazine, which many of you might be knowing by now. It's Sublog. It started in my room one day, and that was first day when I started writing for Jansatta. My first few articles of Jansatta, after reading that, a couple of friends called me, on whom are you angry? And I told them, yes, anger is there. Gradually that anger went off due to my consistent effort to get rid of the anger. So I don't think I am a Hindi chauvinist, but I think language should not be a basis of humiliation. It is a social thing. We are born in a language, we are trained in particular language. We need not be trained in the elite language very well. Our linguistic skills may remain very poor, and I'm really thankful to Hilal, who wrote his MPhil in Hindi, but when he started writing in English, one of his professors in what is it called, SWAS, told him that please remember English is your second language, and 90% of people in the world do not have any second language. So you are very lucky to have a second language. So that is on language, where people keep raising this question, and JNU particularly, this question becomes very important. I appeal to students and teachers that you must write, apart from the ruling class language in which you have to write to survive, must write in what is called vernacular language. That is our own language. Only through that we can engage with people. We can communicate with people. I think one of the questions that I raised to one of my professors, who was also my guide when she wrote her first book, that for whom have you written this book? And the answer, of course, mostly in India is that for the Akas in Europe. But they have to give us recognition. Let me share with you a story about this, and many of you must be knowing. When I asked Ashish Nandi that you have been talking about colonial damage, the cognitive damage that has been done, but you have never moved beyond that. How long shall we keep talking about that we need to get rid of that? He said, we fear. We fear because we will not get recognition. And if we don't get recognition, we will not get air tickets. And these are his words. So I think we have to get rid of this psychology. That is the politics of knowledge. The politics of knowledge is that our knowledge should be political, and should have political consequences, should really understand people's plight, and should give them a mirror, should give them kind of ideas of what's happening with you and how you have to fight. We are no God-like people. We can't fight for people. They have to fight. No matter how much historical materialism we know, unless they know about it, nothing will happen. So we really have to talk in their lingua. And lingua doesn't mean only translating things into Hindi, but that would mean that connecting with their collective consciousness, engaging with their collective consciousness. And one of the projects that I started long back, it is not a funded project, called Mapping Knowledge and Practice in India, and now we are making it Mapping Knowledge and Practice in Asia, trying to understand how people do think, what are the categories and concepts through which they are thinking about themselves, how do they look at their own exploitation, what are the theories they build for themselves. And I think if human beings are theory building beings, then we are making theories whether we know English or not, or French or not. If we are human beings, then we have to make theories. Maybe the theories are not of first order, maybe third order, 10th order, but we can't survive without making theories. So if we are making theories and we are living with those theories, then anybody who wants to change society will have to understand my theory. That's my point. That's why I call it Gyan Ki Rajniti. I did not call it Bharatiya Darshan. I call it Bharatiya Chintan. I'm not still sure how to comprehend that darshan, because it's a civilizational thing and such a huge thing. And such civilizational histories, you will find there are a lot of moments of creativity, humiliation, domination, breaking those dominations through struggles. So there are a lot of resources. So I treat this as reservoir of resources from which we have to take things and create a philosophy for future. Design our philosophy for future struggle. And I call it, we have to move from administrative social science to transformative social science. If social science is not transformative, it is nothing. At the moment, and this is very unformulated critique of what we are doing today, what we are doing is an administrative social science. The state requires this social science to control people. Our politicians are better. They create transformative social science. In whatever ways they want to transform society, they create new social knowledge. We don't even access that social knowledge. I mean, one of the projects that I would like to do in future is to talk to senior political leaders to understand how did they understand society. I mean, look at the Indian thinkers, Ambedkar, Gandhi, Tagore, Nehru, anybody, everybody. Except one of the papers in which we talk about it. Where do you discuss that? Nowhere. So it means if they've transformed India with their own theories, then where have they gone? So this is one of the things that I've raised in this book, and I'll just mention what are the contents of the chapters to make it short and stop it in the next 5 minutes. The first chapter is about possibility of dialogue with Indian philosophy, Bharatiya Darshan. And remember, when I'm saying Indian, just another thing I'm working on now, it doesn't mean philosophy of a community. Indian philosophy has a huge history. I'm just tracing from 6th century BC Vaishali, where in 10 kilometers of radius you will find Buddha, Jain, Mahavir Jain, Mahatma Buddha, Ajit K. Kambal, so many of them, and they were all political. And they were then creating new dialogue, and a new philosophy emerged called Anikantavad there. Then you have stages like Alexander's coming to India, a new dialogue started. Or Muslim philosophers coming to India, much before Muslim rulers coming to India, and the dialogue that happened during that time. And not only India, now I'm discovering that such dialogues were taking place in different parts of Asian society. Uzbekistan, huge dialogue was there. We are discovering, I'm just reading a book on Pakistan, and so much of similarity in the dialogue that is there. So this possibility of dialogue with Indian tradition, Indian Bharatiya Darshan, what I'm calling it, not only 6 schools of thought, but whatever is available. In that, I just want to say one thing. It's a very modest attempt to what I call, there are 2 words in Hindi, and I don't find good translations, so let me use that. Bunana or binana. Bunana is when you are kind of weaving the entire frame, and bunana is you are picking up something. So this book is very modest attempt to binana. I'm picking up concepts and categories to see if that can help us in understanding our reality. Second is the question of universal versus particular. When I'm raising this question, please remember it is not about Indian society only. I'm trying to see what are the universal elements. I want to understand human beings, and I would consider all philosophical traditions anywhere in the world as resources for human beings. And we need to engage in a dialogue with them to appropriate resources for our struggle against humiliation and domination, and whatever forms of domination are there. So it is not about any chauvinism, that Indian philosophy is the best in the world and we are the gurus and whatever. I'm not into it, so please remember, because this is one of the things I had in my mind, so subconsciously it has come in many places. I'm denying that kind of project. The painting of this, the cover design is of a friend of mine whose name is Santosh Verma. I'm very impressed by him. There's a story behind this painting and my relation with him. But interesting thing that I got from him was that he is an abstract painter, and a political scientist asked him, "What are you painting of?" And he got very frustrated and came to me that what should be my reply. So my reply to him was in a form of write-up for him, and I argued that he's trying to paint the consciousness, and the consciousness was from Banaras. He was a person from Banaras, and now I'm really happy to know that Kaviraj, while writing a response to the review of my book done by Hilal, that actually the resources lies with the people who do not know English. And we must try to engage with those people more and more. And this painter is one of those who passed his degree in MA in Fine Art without knowing English, and it was all cheating. But the beautiful thing in his painting is that he creates a frame, then he breaks the frame. Most of the time, now he is having no frame. Normally when you start painting, you create a frame, and within that you try to paint. Initially he was breaking the frame, and now he doesn't have any frame. So I think that is philosophically very connected with what I want to do. So we need to break this frame of the Bharatiya Darshan also. Second chapter, which is being mostly appreciated by people, is on human nature, and I think this is a very fundamental argument that I want to build up. If you look at this is the argument everybody knows that I have been talking about, Bhargav's book, Mythological Individualism, makes a brilliant point that human beings are complex beings. The Western philosophy has committed a mistake of taking one aspect and theorizing the entire thing. But then where is the next book? I asked Professor Bhargav. He said, I could not write that. And I asked why? He said, I didn't have the confidence. So that is politics of knowledge. Why we don't have, I told him that if you don't have confidence, a lesser mortal like us will never have confidence to write about it. So probably that is one thing where we need to work very hard. I got tired while writing, so it became very short. It could become a book in itself. I'm trying to collaborate with more people now to think about it. It has two elements. One is Purusharth and other is Vikar. I think Purusharth has been worked out very well. We have not worked fairly well on Vikar. How that is an integral part of us, and how that not only constitutes us but also shapes us. And if that shapes us, then if it gets more in elements, then how to control that, how society will manage it. So that is something that we need to probably work. But this theory, I think, is a very universal theory and a great contribution of this part of the world. But this makes things very complex. There are 12 elements actually, and that unsettles social sciences completely. 4 Purusharth, 6 Vikar, then Desh and Kal, time and space, and then Bhav and Ras. And Jigyasa can understand it better as he's working on emotion. This Bhav and Ras is also another important point that we have to consider. I don't think I have done justice with those elements, but that can be expanded further. Erich Fromm has been of great help for me in this, but he has his own limitations. Carl Jung has been of great help, but he has his own limitations. Chintamani by Shukla is an excellent book, must be translated in English. I think that is a fundamental book of understanding these elements. So that is one. Second, third thing is मनुष्य के स्वभाव की अवधारणा और समाज अध्ययन. That's the second. Third is समाज अध्ययन के स्वरूप पर भारतीय बहस. This is an old article, quite well read by people, I think. This talks about actually autobiography and social science, and it covers most of the debates in social sciences, 4 debates particularly. And the central figure in this article is Tulsiramji and his Murdaliya. I think this is a text that everybody should read and read repeatedly. I don't know why it has not been translated as yet. It was in the process of being translated, but this is one of the great books of last 50 years, I guess. Then the other chapters are...
Sorry, what is the title of this book?
Murdaliya. Other chapters are weaker chapters, I consider, like संक्रमण काल में चिंतन के लिए सृजन संवाद. This is a dialogue, just very imaginative. That if this is a transition period, I guess, when no philosophy is dominant. This is a very interesting time, and your generation is living in an interesting time. Half the age we passed by thinking that Marxism was the only philosophy that will solve all problems. Half the age we are frustrated. But your generation probably is a generation of creativity. You will think in a better way. And we kept debating. After 90, we were so frustrated, had sleepless nights that we believed in something and we lost that. So what to do with that? But not to be frustrated in the sense that if you, as I remember Ranveer Singh's answer to Manmohan Singh, when Manmohan Singh asked him that, are you still a Marxist for Ranveer Singh? He said, what if one is Marxist without a Communist Party? So I think there is some fundamental thought that Marx has produced is a big resource for humanity at the moment, and we must approach that, but we should not limit ourselves to that. And I would say Marx informed philosophy, Gandhi informed philosophy, Ambedkar informed philosophy, but always searching for something new, because structures of dominance are many and new are being created, so we have to really work on that. So that dialogue I've tried to see that how we can have different kinds of engagements from different traditions and create something new. Then Bharatiya Jantantra for Punah Chintan, Supriya said that this article should have been much more thick. I do agree, because I think what I was trying to do is, if I take this Purusharth and Vikar concept and then try to understand democracy from there, how will it look like? What kind of theory will emerge? Whether it's a great idea or not. We need to even question that, whether the way majoritarianism is growing, maybe it was built in the theory itself. So we have to re-examine that. It's not something not to be examined. But last chapter, I think, is my core chapter, and which is part of my larger thesis on Marxism and religion and Dharma ki Mukti Kami Khoj. And that has been debated, of course. But these two thinkers, who have been considered mostly as Unnayak of Bharatiya Parampara, Hazari Dwivedi and Jaishankar Prasad, the way they have critiqued Hinduism and Hindu philosophy, the way they have produced new approach to look at these things is amazing. And I think they have tried to argue towards the end of their life, in the beginning of independent India, that unless we start rethinking religion, we will not even have secularism. And that is a very fundamental point I think I would like to contest with these secularist philosophers. I think secularism is dead. Long live secularism. That should be our process, in the sense that we really have to recreate. How do we live together? Otherwise we will kill each other. So if we don't want to kill each other, then we really have to think how to live together. And the model of living together that was provided by secularism was very modernist, was not even accepting our spiritual aspirations. That model has completely failed. We have to create new model. So it's a kind of book which invites you to debate. And it's a collective project, so your critique will not be my critique, your critique will self-critique. So I'm quite happy about it. And you have to generate new ideas. If I have missed some philosophers, I have not missed philosophers. In fact, as I'm a reluctant writer, I think I have accumulated a lot of things to say in last 30 years. And you know, some children who start speaking very late, so you will find they will start speaking full sentences. So I think that's my problem also. I started speaking very late and in more articulated form. I kept trying to learn how to write and failed. A good number of books in my library you will find on writing, how to write. And still I failed. Still when I wrote this big book, Jigyasa said that, well, initially I thought the book is not written in proper format. And the format itself has to be broken. The target should not be the publisher. The target should be, the audience should be our people. Are we able to communicate with the people or not? I think the book has failed in communicating to the people. This audience will find the book interesting, may find the book interesting. Some of them may not find the book interesting. I'm not bothered about it. I'm bothered about the last person in my village. And who reads? He complained that your book is too complicated. Of course, I think a lot of ideas are complicated also. But he's commented that your language is also a little complicated. And that gave very disheartening feeling I wrote good number of articles in Prabhat Khabar, and I was very happy because my villagers were reading them. And I kept writing for long. People told me, why are you writing Prabhat Khabar? I think that is one of the tasks that we have to perform. Talk to your own people. I think the book, success or failure, will actually be defined by that, apart from your appreciating it or critiquing it. Thank you very much. Sorry I took you.
We are always mesmerized by whatever Professor Thakur says. That was the case today as well. And now I would like to call upon Professor Gopalji Pradhan to come and speak. Before that, just an announcement. Since JNU Academics is not funded by any other organization or anything, and we are an independent student organization, we are accepting donations. So there is a copy which has a scan, so you can just scan and give us the money, or you can just give us hard cash there. And there is, you can just write down your phone numbers, email ID and name, so that we can inform you about our future events as well.
शुक्रिया सुप्रिय भाई। मणिन जी और दोस्तों, पहली बात तो यही मुझे कहनी है कि जिस भाषा में उन्होंने किताब लिखी है उसी भाषा में मुझे बोलना है। और मैं गारंटी नहीं कर सकता कि मेरी बातें आप समझ पाएंगे कि नहीं, लेकिन वही भाषा है जिसमें मैं बोल सकता हूं। दूसरी बात ये कहनी थी कि देखिए, मैं यहाँ का विद्यार्थी रहा हूं, और जब भी मैं जवाहरलाल नेहरू विश्वविद्यालय में आता हूं तो अपने विद्यार्थी दिनों में चला जाता हूं। हमारे विद्यार्थी दिनों की विशेषता यही थी, या कह सकते हैं कि मैंने उसी तरह से अपने आप को समझा, वह यह कि हम यह मान कर चलते थे कि हमारे अध्यापक गण सिस्टम का पार्ट हो चुके हैं। इस बात को आप लोग एकदम मतलब इस रूप में न लीजिए, लेकिन हम इसी रूप में अपने आप को परसीव करते थे कि हमारे अध्यापकगण सिस्टम का पार्ट हो चुके हैं। एक जमाने में वे विद्रोही रहे थे, लेकिन अब हमारे लिए वो सिर्फ गार्जियन की बोझ हो जाए। अपने समय के सवालों से हमें ही जूझना है, और ये कॉन्फिडेंस हम जितना जल्दी अर्जित कर लें उतना अच्छा। तो मैंने जैसा कहा कि मैं थोड़ा विद्यार्थी हो जाता हूं यहाँ आते ही, तो उस मुद्रा में भी मैं आ सकता हूं। तो इसके लिए पहले से मैं मणिन भाई से माफी मांगता हूं। बहरहाल, दूसरी बात ये कहनी थी मुझे कि आम तौर पर ये मान के चलना चाहिए कि किताब में जो नहीं है उसके बारे में बात करने से कोई फायदा नहीं है। बात इसके इर्द गिर्द होनी चाहिए कि किताब में क्या है और उसमें क्या समस्या है। ठीक है, लेकिन कभी कभी ऐसा भी होता है, जैसा कि उन्होंने कहा है कि संवाद के लिए खुला हुआ है, तो इसलिए कभी कभी इस पर भी चर्चा कर लेना बुरा नहीं है कि किताब में क्या नहीं है, ताकि जो मूल समस्या है उसकी समृद्धि की जा सके, अरे इट कैन बी एनरिच्ड। तो इसलिए हमको ये भी जरूरी लगता है कि कुछ कुछ जो नहीं है उसके बारे में भी बात की जाए। अच्छा, इस सिलसिले में एक सवाल मैं आप लोगों के सामने भी रख रहा हूं, मेरे सामने भी है, और दरअसल बहुत दिनों से ये सवाल है। हम चाहेंगे कि आप लोग भी इसमें मदद करें समझने में। ये जो एसेंशियलाइजेशन है पश्चिमी भारतीय, ये कितना वैलिड है, इसलिए मैं कह रहा हूं क्योंकि पश्चिम भी, जैसे कहते हैं लोग कि ओरिएंट कंस्ट्रक्शन है, तो ऐसे ही ऑक्सीडेंट भी तो एक कंस्ट्रक्शन है। माने जिसको आप पश्चिमी कहते हैं, उसमें कल्पना करिए आप कि यूरोप के भीतर भी इटली, जर्मनी, फ्रांस, इंग्लैंड, और उससे बाहर निकलिए तो अमेरिका, इन सब को आप पश्चिमी कह देते हैं। क्या ये सब एक ही हैं? उसी के उलट जब कोई कहे कि भारतीय, तो मैं कहूंगा कि पश्चिमी के उलट केवल भारतीय आप क्यों कह रहे हैं? एक जमाना तो था ऐसा ना, जब जिस बात की उन्होंने जिक्र किया, स्वाधीनता आंदोलन, तो उस जमाने में हम कहते थे एशियाई सभ्यता, यूरोपीय बनाम एशियाई सभ्यता, उस जमाने में हम कहते थे। तो केवल भारतीय पर हम क्यों आ गए हैं? अब जब एशियाई आप कहेंगे तो आप दिमाग में रखिए कि चीनी, जापानी, इस्लाम, ये जो इतना डाइवर्स है, इसको छोड़ करके भारतीय, ये जो दो कैटेगरीज हैं इस किताब में कंटिन्यूअसली रन कर रही हैं। मुझे माफ करिएगा, लेकिन मुझे ये थोड़ा सा अनकंफर्टेबल लगा, और मुझे बहुत वैलिड नहीं लगती है ये कैटेगरीज, क्योंकि ये उस कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी को, अच्छा अब चलिए मान लीजिए देशों की बात मैंने की, उलट करके एक और बात, एक ही देश के बारे में, क्या इंग्लैंड के समग्र चिंतन को इंग्लैंड के शासक वर्ग का ही चिंतन कहा जा सकता है? आज जैसे आप संपूर्ण भारतीय मेधा का प्रतिनिधित्व केवल एक पार्टी को नहीं देंगे, उसके विरोधी भी हैं, वे भी क्लेम करेंगे कि हम भी भारतीय हैं। तो क्या ऐसा हमें इंग्लैंड के बारे में नहीं सोचना चाहिए? क्या हमें ऐसा फ्रांस के बारे में नहीं सोचना चाहिए? क्या पश्चिम में पश्चिम के आलोचक नहीं रहते हैं? स्वयं मणिन भाई ने उदाहरण दिया है गांधी जी के हिंद स्वराज का, कि उसमें पीछे की तरफ जितने लेखकों के नाम गिनाए गए हैं वो सब अंग्रेजी में लिखने वाले लोग हैं। यानी पश्चिम भी एक तरह का नहीं है, जैसे पूरब एक तरह का नहीं है, भारत भी वैसे ही एक तरह का नहीं है। उदाहरण के लिए थोड़ा सा निराशाजनक मुझे लगा कि भारतीय दर्शन या भारतीय चिंतन, उनके शब्दों में जिसको वो प्रेफर करते हैं, वो अगर पुरुषार्थ और विकार, तो इसे फिर जिसे हिंदू कहा जाता है उस तक ही सीमित क्यों न माने? एक दूसरी बात कि मणिन भाई भी जानते ही होंगे, याकूब मसीह नाम के एक लेखक थे, दर्शन शास्त्र पर लिखते थे, बिहार के ही थे और हिंदी में लिखते थे। तो उन्होंने निरीश्वरवाद के बारे में लिखा है, और उनका कहना है कि भारत में निरीश्वरवाद की परंपरा उतनी ही पुरानी है जितनी कि आस्तिकता की परंपरा है। मैं अभी 6 दर्शनों की बात नहीं कर रहा हूं। तो कहने का मतलब कि जिसको आप भारतीय दर्शन कहते हैं, उसका भी अगर पुरुषार्थ और विकार के ही इर्द गिर्द केंद्रित बनता है, तो फिर वह भी एक तरह का रिडक्शन है। अब बात यह है धर्म के बारे में। अच्छा, एक चीज का आप लोग ध्यान दीजिएगा कि ये एक चीज हो गई है, वह यह कि जब से भाजपा सत्ता में आई तो एक तरह का डिफीटिज्म है इंटेलिजेंसिया में, है? और वो बहुत क्लियर है, दिखाई पड़ता है। क्या कि हम क्यों हारे, इसी पर विश्लेषण हमें करना है? अब जब उसी में हमें विश्लेषण करना है तो ठीक है, धर्म की ताकत। कब मार्क्सवाद ने कहा कि धर्म में ताकत नहीं है? खुद ही मणिन भाई ने इस बात को लिखा है कि लोग जनता के लिए अफीम है, इसको तो बहुत याद रखते हैं, लेकिन वह पीड़ितों के दिल की आह है, इसको याद नहीं रखते हैं। तो इसलिए अगर मार्क्सिज्म का रिलीजन के प्रति कोई दृष्टिकोण है तो उसमें ये दोनों बातें शामिल हैं। तो इसलिए मैं कह रहा था कि वो जो कह लीजिए कि एक धर्म, तो धर्म की ताकत मार्क्सवाद स्वीकार करता है कि धर्म की ताकत है मनुष्यों में, तभी तो इतने बड़े पैमाने पर फैला। यहां तक कि उन्होंने कहा कि आधुनिक काल से पहले विद्रोह भी धर्म के आवरण में हुए हैं। और सौभाग्य से मैंने एक ऐसे चिंतक की पुस्तक, जिन्होंने जवाहरलाल नेहरू विश्वविद्यालय से दर्शन शास्त्र में पहली पीएचडी उपाधि पाई, उन्होंने एमए का डिसर्टेशन अपना लिखा था बीएचयू में रहते हुए, प्रोफेसर हर्षवर्धन के निर्देशन में, धर्म की मार्क्सवादी धारणा। तो उसका मैंने संपादन किया है। तो बात यह है कि जो धर्म है ना, उसे मार्क्सवाद ने कभी ऐसा नहीं कहा कि वो बहुत छोटी चीज है। उसकी जड़ें हैं समाज में। और इसी नाते से मुझे थोड़ा सा एक और चीज लगा, माने एक तरह से कह लीजिए कि आप मानने लायक माने तो ठीक ही है, न मानने लायक माने तो कोई बात नहीं। वह यह कि जो धर्म है वो भी स्थिर नहीं रहे। सिक्खी बहुत उदार धर्म था। किसान आंदोलन के दौरान हम सबने जाना इस बात को कि वह धर्म ऐसा है, संभवतः एकमात्र धर्म होगा, जहां पर धार्मिक जो सत्ता है उसके लिए चुनाव होते हैं। शिरोमणि गुरुद्वारा प्रबंधक कमेटी और भगत सिंह वगैरह ने लड़ाई लड़ी इसके लिए कि महंतों का कब्जा नहीं रहना चाहिए धार्मिक संस्थाओं पर। तो धर्म के भीतर लोकतंत्र की पैठ का एक उदाहरण है वो। इस बात को हम लोगों ने जाना किसान आंदोलन के दौरान। लेकिन यह भी सही बात है कि एक दौर में सिक्खी बहुत ही कट्टर हो गई थी। इस बात को हमको स्वीकार करना चाहिए। तो जो धर्म है उसमें से कोई भी धर्म इस बात को क्लेम नहीं कर सकता कि वो सारतः ऐसा है। यानी वह भी सामाजिक परिस्थितियों के बदलाव के हिसाब से, अब कौन इस बात पर यकीन करेगा। मैं पिछले दिनों पढ़ रहा था एक किताब को, मैं चाहता था कि उनका भी जिक्र कहीं रहता इस किताब में, राहुल सांकृत्यायन। उनकी एक किताब है दर्शन दिग्दर्शन, और वैसी किताब दुनिया भर में बहुत कम मिलेगी। इस्लामिक फिलॉसफी पर बाकायदे उसमें एक चैप्टर है। इस्लाम के बारे में सबकी धारणा यह है कि उसमें दर्शन क्या हो सकता है, लेकिन बाकायदे उसमें एक चैप्टर है और मूल स्रोतों के सहारे वो लिखा गया चैप्टर है। तो जिस बात की ओर मैं आपका ध्यान दिलाना चाहता था वह यह कि उसमें लिखा हुआ है कि जब ईसाइयत को कंपीट करना हुआ इस्लाम से, तो विश्वविद्यालय खोले गए। क्यों खोले गए? क्योंकि इस्लाम नॉलेज का धर्म था। नॉलेज सारा का सारा मुस्लिम धर्मावलंबी लोगों के बीच में था, इसलिए उससे जब compete करना हुआ ईसाई लोगों को, तो उन्होंने विश्वविद्यालय खोले, और इसलिए सारे शुरुआती विश्वविद्यालय जो हैं वो ईसाई धार्मिक संस्थाओं द्वारा खोले गए, क्योंकि उन्हें नॉलेज की दुनिया में compete करना था इस्लाम से। अब इस बात पर कौन यकीन करेगा? तो एक समय इस्लाम वैसा भी था, पूरी दुनिया का ज्ञान, और इसमें कोई माने लोग जानते होंगे कि हिंदुस्तान के भी सबसे महान ग्रंथ अरबिक में अनुदित हो चुके थे। तो पूरी दुनिया का ज्ञान एक जमाने में अनुवाद होकर के अरबी में था, लेकिन जैसा मैंने कहा कि ऐतिहासिक सामाजिक परिस्थितियों ने उस धर्म के भी स्वरूप को बदला। ईसाइयत भी, अब क्लेम करें लोग कि आज जनतंत्र वो फैला रहे हैं तो अलग बात है, अन्यथा बहुत कट्टरता निभाई है उन्होंने। तो इसलिए जो धर्म है, उन धर्मों की स्टडी के लिए सेकुलरिज्म से आप लाख गुरेज करें, लेकिन उनके अध्ययन के लिए कुछ सेकुलर कैटेगरीज का इस्तेमाल करना पड़ेगा। वो अपने ही क्लेम से, जिस बात को मार्क्स ने कहा ना कि किसी युग को सिर्फ उसी आधार पर नहीं जांचना चाहिए जो वह युग या उस जमाने के लोग अपने बारे में कहते हैं, बल्कि उस जमाने की जो ऐतिहासिक परिस्थितियां हैं उनके प्रसंग में उस युग की परीक्षा करनी चाहिए। समय हो जाएगा तो बता दीजिएगा यार सुप्रीम को। तो इसलिए मुझे लगता है कि धर्म की भी परीक्षा जब हमें करनी चाहिए तो धर्म में जो कहा जा रहा है उसी आधार पर नहीं करनी चाहिए, बल्कि जिन ऐतिहासिक सामाजिक परिस्थितियों के मद्देनजर धर्मों के स्वरूप में भी बदलाव आता रहा है, उनकी जो सामाजिक भूमिका रही है। अब आज की ही हम बात करें तो मैं नॉर्थ ईस्ट में रहा हूं, और संभव है कि 10-12 साल पहले वहां पर था मैं, तो पुराना अनुभव मेरा पड़ गया। लेकिन जिसको आप हिंदी हार्टलैंड में भक्ति आंदोलन कहते हैं, जिसने मीरा जैसी एक विद्रोही स्त्री को एक सामाजिक आधार दिया, जो पूरे राणाशाही को चैलेंज करती हुई साधुओं के साथ अकेले घूम रही है, तो उसे कहां से ताकत मिल रही है? इस मूवमेंट से, जिसको भक्ति आंदोलन कहा जाता है। तो भक्ति आंदोलन के दरमियान जिस तरह के धर्म के बारे में हम कल्पना कर सकते हैं, उस तरह का धर्म मुझे वहां पर दिखाई पड़ा है। वहां के समूचे गांव की हर एक गतिविधि के साथ धर्म जुड़ा हुआ, फिर भी वह ऐसा है जिसमें कोई कट्टरता आपको नहीं दिखाई पड़ रही है। अब वहां पर जो है वो धर्माधिकार है, वो क्रिकेट भी खेल रहे हैं? पुआल का जो है वो बना करके पांवों की रक्षा करने के लिए जो होता है पैड बना करके, पुआल का पैड बना करके क्रिकेट खेल रहे हैं। वहां पर डांस सिखाया जा रहा है, जिसको क्षत्रिय डांस कहते हैं। तो एक मतलब पूरा समूचा समाज उससे प्रभावित है। लोगों के घर के झगड़े हो रहे हैं तो भी बुलाया जा रहा है सुलझाने के लिए, लेकिन फिर भी वो उस तरह का नहीं है। तो इसलिए मेरे कहने का मतलब कि धर्म भी अलग अलग समाजों में, अलग अलग ऐतिहासिक स्थितियों में अलग अलग भूमिका निभा सकता है। इसलिए उसे एक ही तरह का, और जब आप उसे, फिर से मैं कह रहा हूं कि हल्की सी मेरी निराशा है इस बात को लेकर के, अन्य परंपराओं के बारे में मैंने बात की ही, जैसे चीन है, जापान है, खुद इस्लाम है, तो उनकी बात मैं छोड़ दे रहा हूं। लेकिन भारत के भीतर भी आप कहिए तो बुद्धिज्म है, तो वहां उसी रूप में चीजें नहीं आई। तो मेरे कहने का मतलब कि जो धर्मों के बारे में अध्ययन है वो भी धर्म के अपने क्लेम के आधार पर होने की बजाय उससे कुछ सेकुलर किस्म के टूल्स के जरिए, और जब मैं टूल्स कह रहा हूं तो फिर मैं भाषा संबंधी एक दिक्कत का जिक्र कर दे रहा हूं, जिस बात को कहा ही अभी मणिंद भाई ने, उपागम। अब इस शब्द का अर्थ खोलने के लिए किताब में बहुत दूर आना पड़ा मुझे। वो मैंने लगभग बीच में आकर के मेथोडोलॉजिकल से समझ में आता है कि उपागम माने ये, और मैं अपनी बात नहीं कह रहा हूं, मैं ठीक ठाक एक जानकार सज्जन से मैंने पूछा कि उपागम माने क्या होता है, तो उन्होंने कहा कि आप बड़ी जटिल पुस्तकें पढ़ते हैं। समझ है? अच्छा, मैं इसलिए कह रहा हूं पुस्तकों की ये खूबी होती है जिनका मैंने जिक्र किया, राहुल सांकृत्य हैं। आश्चर्य करिएगा कि वहां पर विज्ञान शब्द का अर्थ वह है ही नहीं जो इस पुस्तक में है, या आमतौर पर जो हम लोग समझते हैं। वहां पर विज्ञान का अर्थ है अध्यात्म, विशिष्ट ज्ञान के अर्थ में, है ना? तो ये शब्दों के साथ होता है, लेकिन फिर भी, और वो बाधाएं होती हैं, तो इसलिए मुझे लगता है कि कुछ एक चीजों अभी की जा सकती थी। जो बात मैं कहना चाहता था उसमें वो ये बात शामिल थी कि जो भारतीय दर्शन है वह भी बहुत बड़ा है? रामचंद्र शुक्ल का इन्होंने जिक्र किया। रामचंद्र शुक्ल के उन निबंधों पर मैंने थोड़ा बहुत काम किया है, और मेरा मानना है कि वो निबंध शुद्ध रूप से उपनिवेशवाद विरोधी आंदोलन की उपज है, क्योंकि उनमें उससे प्राप्त चेतना के जरिए मनोभावों को देखा गया है। अगर किसी ने ध्यान से उन निबंधों को पढ़ा हो तो उसमें आप देखिएगा, उस जमाने में बहुत इसका महत्व था ना, घृणा। तो प्रेमचंद पर किसी ने आरोप लगाया घृणा के प्रचारक हैं। प्रेमचंद ने कहा घृणा जरूरी है, आप खराब चीजों से प्रेम नहीं कर सकते, उनके प्रति घृणा आपके मन में होनी चाहिए। उसी तरह से रामचंद्र शुक्ल ने लिखा क्रोध आवश्यक चीज है। अगर स्वाधीनता आंदोलन का परिप्रेक्ष्य न होता तो क्रोध की वो प्रशंसा न करते। इसी तरह से लोभ के विरोध में लिखा उन्होंने। तो बहरहाल, तो रामचंद्र शुक्ल के प्रसंग में मतलब इतनी सी बात मुझे कहनी थी कि थोड़ा और उसकी डीप स्टडी की जरूरत है, और फिर मैं कहूंगा कि उसके लिए भी कुछ सेकुलर टूल्स का इस्तेमाल करना पड़ेगा। अगेन एक अंतिम बात कह करके मैं खत्म कर रहा हूं कि वेस्ट को भी साइंस, सेकुलरिज्म और रैशनैलिटी सिर्फ इतने में रिड्यूस कर देना उचित नहीं है, और न ऐसा है कि उसके प्रति हमको कोई दुराव रखना चाहिए। दीज थिंग्स आर डिजायरेबल थिंग्स। कहा ही उन्होंने कि मान लीजिए एक दूसरे के साथ रहना सीखने के लिए जरूरी है कि हमें सेकुलर एटीट्यूड पैदा हो। खुद सेकुलरिज्म शब्द के लिए हिंदी में अगेन रामचंद्र शुक्ल से ही, तो उन्होंने कहा सांप्रदायिक, जहां उन्हें आज जिस अर्थ में, अब सांप्रदायिक जब उन्होंने कहा तो उसका अर्थ कम्युनल नहीं था, उसका अर्थ था विशेष संप्रदाय, है ना? तो सेकुलर का मतलब इहलौकिक। इस मूल अर्थ में स्वाभाविक रूप से हम सबको, और जहां वो कह रहे हैं कि आध्यात्मिकता नहीं है वेस्ट में, और हिंदुस्तान का चिंतन सार्वभौमिक है, अगेन मुझे लगता है कि ये थोड़ा सा ज्यादा हो गया है। These both things need qualifications. Thank you.
Yeah, or would you? Yeah.
I think few things require more discussion. I don't think we have time to get into that too much, but I think there is no point in believing that East is East and West is West. That is false category, there's no doubt about it. I think the entire text is questioning that category. The only thing what I'm trying to argue is that there is a Purupaksh. That Purupaksh is of the modern West. The modern West, about which Zizek says, there is an end of time. We are standing at the end of time. The time of several hundred years, that is that of the modern West, with dominant understanding of science, with dominant understanding of how to manage four elements that I've said. I redefine those four elements. Earth is human beings' relation with nature. Kam is the desire, not only sexuality, but desires produced by body. Dharma is our knowledge of nature, the rule knowledge of nature. And moksha is being conscious of consciousness. I mean, my students are aware of that, so I'm not repeating that. So these four elements are such around which we can reconstitute the debate between different civilizations, not only East and West. Latin America, Africa, different small tribes in Africa, they also have not produced knowledge. In fact, Neelam, one of CPF's PhD students, is arguing that how tribal community are epistemic communities. And there's entire worldview, there's a lot of philosophical elements, only that they don't express their philosophy the way we do it. Not in written forms, but their songs, their everyday life is full of philosophical worldview. So I think this categorization, if it is emerging from the text, I would consider that a big failure of my writing capacity. I never would mean. And then ACI, I think that's something that is very important. And we are now moving to that. Because in fact, I read a paper somewhere, is there an Indian philosophy? I don't think there is an Indian philosophy. ACI is a unit. The artificial unit, India is an artificial unit. We have nation-state boundary, therefore we have created it. And several traditions are there. So on secularism, it's very interesting to note. It's a hypothesis one can examine and do further research on that. The word secular emerges from Seljuk. There was a Seljuk Empire. Rumi was official philosopher of the Seljuk Empire. And the pronunciation of that is almost like secular. The first Christian crusade was against the Seljuk Empire. And so the philosophy of Seljuk Empire was called secular. And that became secularism gradually because the Christianity was against that philosophy. And that philosophy was such, you know Rumi very well. So when Gandhi started talking of secularism, I think he drew from Rumi, not from the West. The Western secularism was anti-religion secularism. Gandhi's secularism was not anti-religion but critic within religion. So I think that is another thing. On Marx and religion, I think there's a need to rethink about the way Marxist writers have thought about it till now. And the root goes into the philosophy of science. And I have traveled the entire journey with a lot of time and energy and hard work. And what I've discovered is that positivism was not integral to Marxism, which became integral to Marxism due to Plekhanov. And there's a very interesting debate called Machism. When quantum physics emerged, and Mach was a philosopher, he said, if Marxism is science, is based on science, then if there's a development in science, how do you accommodate that development in Marxism? Because it is about consciousness there. The debate in Russia was very interesting. Plekhanov said that this is a conspiracy against Marxism. Stalin also said this is a conspiracy against Marxism. Quantum physics is conspiracy against Marxism. Only Lenin was very intelligent. He said, we are in the middle of the revolution. We cannot debate these things, but definitely we should accommodate that gradually and rethink about our understanding of reality. But quantum physics transformed the understanding of reality fundamentally, like the chaos has transformed the reality fundamentally. And there's no point in again creating East and West, because I think knowledge is a collective resource of humanity as a whole, produced by anywhere, by anybody. Then I think Purusharth and Vikar was a central point, because that constitutes the central issue. I don't think I'm saying that, and precisely because of that I said it's Chintan, not Darshan, that I'm trying to take the Indian philosophy in a comprehensive way. I'm saying I'm selecting certain things, chunna. And what I have selected, there are two things I have selected. One, the idea of creating Purupaksh and Uttarpaksh, but that is very justified way of engaging in a debate. That method I have used even in field work, social science research. I think it's a wonderful technique of engaging in social science research. Second is the Purusharth and Vikar. I think Purusharth and Vikar, there is a debate about it. Daya Krishna believes that it is not integral to Indian philosophy. I have mentioned those debates. Whereas a lot of people think that it is a very secular category. Just because it was emerged in Indian society or by the Hindus, that doesn't mean that is not secular. What is secular finally? I have this problem of binary between secular and religious, but I'll not get into this. I think all civilizations have produced certain categories which have universal values, and certain categories which have very particular values. So this particular idea of understanding human beings, the nature of human being, is a very powerful tool to understand human being anywhere, not only in India, anywhere in the world, person belonging to any religion. And I think I have a more complex theory of human nature, I guess, which I will try to write if I get time, that these 10 elements are constitutive of us, and they are dependent on time and space, in the sense, I give this example to my students, that when I was a student, being from Bihar, traveling from Patna to Delhi, till Banaras I used to thought I should become a bureaucrat. After Banaras I always thought I should become an academician. While going back, till Banaras I used to think academics is better. After Banaras I used to think bureaucracy is better. This dilemma is that of the space. You know, the space is constituted in a way where power flows from the barrel of the gun. You can't help it. If that is there, then power is most important. Power to dominate is most important. Coming to Delhi, you don't need to be bureaucrat. I have never met the Vice Chancellor till now. In the entire 16 years of my staying in JNU, I have met the Vice Chancellor twice. Once for interview, another time for the leave. That's it. Why should I? But if you are in Patna University, you are supposed to do parikrama of the Vice Chancellor every day. So this all depends where are you. So I think these are universal categories which may help us in understanding the reality. If I get time, I can talk about this in more. Intellectual defeatism, I think there could be one. I am not defeatist. I don't think that BJP's coming to power has created any problem for me. कोई नृप हो ही हमें क्या हानि, पहले भी कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता था, मुझे क्या फर्क था, मैं पहले भी किसी से नहीं मिला, अब क्यों मिलूंगा. What actually has done is that it has exposed our way of thinking, and therefore we have to rethink about it. There is no doubt about it. We should not be arrogant to suggest that the philosophy, the method, the technique, the method of engagement that we had do not need any kind of modification. I think they do need, and that is the modesty that intellectuals should have to accept that somewhere we have failed to understand. Marxism, I think we can debate about this since you have also worked on it, that how within Marxism there are debates to open Marxism. Open not in the sense that anything and everything is acceptable, but open in the sense that you bring in categories like emotion, feeling. They are very integral to human beings. You have avoided that. So probably these things we can think of. Sorry, I just... Thank you.
sort of informal conversation. So it's all right, sir, if you cross the time. This is, well, we wanted this space that it's between a post-dinner talk and a seminar. So it's like that. So yeah. Now I would like to call upon student discussion. Can we begin with Prachi? Prachi? Sir, can you take all the student discussions and then you can respond? Or you want three?
No.
Okay, all?
I'm taking note of.
Oh, okay.
You used to take the whole class and then
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, JNU Academics and Supriyo for this opportunity. I was very happy to read this book, and let me begin by saying that this is like a nostalgia trip for JNU students who passed out or who are not attending the classes, because this book thoroughly reminds them of Maninder sir's classes, and the way he's speaking, I think it reflects truly in the book. So if I have to tell somebody like who's from JNU, my batchmate, it will be just like Maninder sir ka classes right from front, and you'll find that. So that's one thing. Secondly, I was impressed by the fact that this is a book, an intervention made in Hindi. I've spent 6 to 7 years now, I think, dealing with text with two authors, Shukla and Dwivedi, and other thinkers, Bhartindu Harishchandra, for example, and use my training as a political scientist to incorporate and to discuss different ideas that emerge in their works. And I was very happy to see Tagore sir writing this book, and I enjoyed the language also. Like I enjoyed reading the book. But coming to the discussion, I think there is an opportunity missed here, according to me, because when you're using thinkers like Shukla and Dwivedi and also Jaishankar Prasad, I think that even in that period, the period that you're only using in the book, which is about the early first 50 or the first half of the 20th century, I think there is also a huge debate about the nature of the language, about the nature of Hindi. And I think this problem about the language and the systemic discrimination does not resolve by just using Hindi instead of English. I think there has to be a deeper discussion about what kind, because the thinkers that you are using in the book, let's say Dwivedi, are discussing this question, are discussing the nature of the language that they want, what should be the inspiration and aspiration of the language. Should it just end at using Hindi? Should it just end at replacing one language for the another? So I thought there is an opportunity, because this is an intervention coming from a social scientist, so I thought there was an opportunity missed there that the book could have used to speak more about it, and I did not find that. Coming to the 2 points that sir just highlighted, the book tries to make. One is about, it urges the readers and scholars of social sciences to incorporate Indian intellectual tradition to make a better sense of human nature and also the society. I think it's quite a thought-provoking one. It also urges them to strike a balance in staying away from, by using the Indian intellectual tradition, in staying away from extremist as well and essentialist tendencies, as well as to go beyond dominant Western frameworks, which I think sir has mentioned. What I got the sense from the framework of Purusharth and Vikar that is suggested by the author in the book is that somehow it underestimates or does not discuss the structures of oppression and their inherent link with the Indian intellectual or with the Indian knowledge tradition itself. So after reading the entire book, I got a sense that it does not discuss enough about, it does not take a critical inward gaze towards the Indian knowledge tradition that it supports and emphasizes on. I think it doesn't take into account the consenting sensibilities present within the Indian knowledge tradition and the culture. For example, there is very brief mention about, let's say, the role and status of women. I think it's a huge issue and it's been an ongoing one, and since the author has continuously gone back to the first 50 years or the independence struggle, the authors in that, and cited 2 of them. I thought that it's a very old trick in the book to just mention 1 or 2 examples of, let's say, competent women intellectuals and say there was like a a very empowering women tradition or something like that, or a feminist tradition present. I don't think you can reduce it to that. I mean, the women issues or the massive structural discrimination and assault violence to that. I don't think it. It fails to do that, and I think this is my first point about the central argument of the book. Linked to this is that it does not talk about the politics of the Indian knowledge tradition itself, whether it is a specific text that it mentions or the schools of thought that the author discusses. I think it does not talk about their politics. It does not talk about their contestations. It does not talk about their context or who they are replying to and how where are they based. Without before arguing that they should be borrowed or there is some possibility there. So I think this is something that I found hugely missing in the book. About the second argument with regard to Purv Paksha and Uttar Paksha, I think it is very interesting argument, but my issue is that in the entire book I found that the author is taking or sir is taking Purv Paksha to be too shallow. I mean, there is a very rhetorical discussion on behalf of the Purv Paksha there, whether it is the dominant Western framework or whether it is the secularist colonialism, secularist philosophers, as he said, or English language dominated academia. I think there is a very shallow discussion or shallow representation of the Purv Paksha. So, in my opinion, or that's what borrowing from him only. If this framework has to be, utilized properly, Purv Paksha and Uttar Paksha, there has to be like a very deep, nuance and a, clear or a more less reduced, to use Pradhanji's term, not that reductionist understanding of the Purv Paksha, so that we can have a better engagement as the Uttar Paksha with what the Purv Paksha is suggesting. So this is what I got from the book. These are my arguments, and broadly, while I enjoyed reading the book, I thought it could have done better with the linked with the point of Uttar Paksha and Purv Paksha. Let's say when talking about Uttar Paksha, I could have been benefited more as a reader and a scholar with more citations. Who's saying this? If there is an argument in Uttar Paksha, where is it? I mean, is Uttar Paksha using this term or is it author's interpretation of that? So that's all I think from my side. But regardless of this, I think I really enjoyed reading the book, and I think everybody else will. And it's definitely a thought-provoking book, and several arguments are like that. So thank you.
थैंक यू JNU Academic एंड सुप्रियो मुझे इस चर्चा में शामिल करने के लिए। इस बुक के बारे में पहली बात मैं ये कहना चाहूँगी कि सर अपनी क्लासेस में हर बार कहा करते थे कि सबसे मुश्किल काम है सोचना, और जब आप इस बुक को कवर टू कवर पढ़ लेंगे तब आपको ये लगेगा कि आप चाहें या ना चाहें हर अध्याय में और शुरू से आखिरी तक दिस बुक विल फोर्स यू टू थिंक in one way or the other. This book will force you to think. तो मुझे लगता है कि ये किसी भी ऑथर के लिए बहुत एक सक्सेसफुल अटेम्प्ट है अगर वो अपने काम से किसी को भी सोचने के लिए मजबूर कर पा रहे हैं तो। एंड आई थिंक सर ने जितने भी प्रश्नों के साथ वो जूझते रहे हैं पिछले 5 से 6 सालों में, जब से हम लोग देख रहे हैं, वो मॉडर्निटी के सवाल हों, लिबरेशन के सवाल हों, रिलीजन और पॉलिटिक्स के कनेक्शन के सवाल हों, सभी के बारे में इस बुक में कुछ ना कुछ बात ज़रूर है। 2-3 बातें मैं कहना चाहूँगी एक रियलाइजेशन की तरह जो किताब में कही गई है, बस उसी का थोड़ा विस्तार करते हुए, और 3-4 कुछ मेरे प्रश्न हैं कुछ बेहतर समझदारी डेवलप करने के लिए किताब पर। पश्चिमी दर्शन में जब हम ज्ञान को देखते हैं, जिस तरह ज्ञान को देखा गया है, तो कुछ पैमानों पे ज्ञान को ज्ञान मानने के लिए उसे कुछ पैमाने हैं जिसमें उनको नापा जाता है। तो ज्ञान क्या हो, सार्वभौमिक हो, यूनिवर्सल हो, धर्मनिरपेक्ष हो, सेक्युलर हो, इंडिपेंडेंट हो, जिन कंडीशंस में वो प्रोड्यूस हुआ है उससे इंडिपेंडेंट हो, और विशिष्ट हो, स्पेशलाइज्ड हो। तो अगर इन 4 पैरामीटर्स पे कोई ज्ञान खरा उतर रहा है तो ये ज्ञान कहलाएगा। कुछ ऐसी मानसिकता सर्वव्यापी है, और ये मानसिकता मुझे लगता है कि पश्चिमी दर्शन से ही आ रही है, और ये भी एक तरह सर्वव्यापी माना जा रहा है इस बात को भी कि इस तरह का ज्ञान सृजन जो है वो सिर्फ पश्चिमी दर्शन ही कर पाया है आज तक। तो इसको थोड़ा सा कंटेस्ट करते हुए, सर की किताब से थोड़ा क्लू लेते हुए, मैं इसको कहना चाहूँगी कि अगर भारतीय ज्ञान परंपराओं में देखें या भारतीय दर्शन में भी देखें तो हम कुछ एपिस्टेमोलॉजिकल ट्रेसेस हमें अरण्यका में, ब्रह्मणा में या अन्वीक्षिकी में, अन्वीक्षिकी तो अपने आप में लॉजिकल प्रोसीजर और एक्सिजेंसीज को दिखाती है, जहाँ पे आप ज्ञान की प्रामाणिकता को जांच सकते हैं, मान्यता को जांच सकते हैं। तो ये जो एक मान्यता है कि पश्चिमी दर्शन के पास एपिस्टेमोलॉजिकल ट्रेसेस और हमारे पास नहीं है, वही बात है, हमारा नहीं, भारतीय दर्शन के पास नहीं है, इसको कंटेस्ट किया जा सकता है। दूसरी बात मैं कहना चाहूँगी, मनुष्य के स्वभाव को लेके जिस तरह से सर ने एक थ्योराइजेशन दिया है इस किताब में, मुझे लगता है बहुत विस्तार से मनुष्य के स्वभाव पे बात की गई है। और उसी के बारे में सोचते हुए कुछ ऑथर्स को मैं रेफर करना चाहूँगी, ब्रैड ग्रेगरी, जॉर्ज मक्सीडी और जी.एल. एल्टन। ये लोग, मैकिंटायर ऑब्वियसली, एरिस्टोटल, मैकिंटायर, कुछ और पहले के हो गए, इन लोगों ने मोरालिटी और वर्च्यूज के बारे में बहुत सारी बातें की हैं। इसी विषय में मैं कहना चाहूँगी कि रिलीजन हमेशा से मोरालिटी का बेसिस रहा है, स्रोत रहा है, जहाँ वेस्टर्न पॉलिटिकल फिलोसफी ने और वेस्टर्न सिविलाइजेशन ने रिलीजन में अपनी मोरालिटी को ढूंढा है बहुत लंबे समय तक। रिफॉर्मेशन खत्म होते होते नेशन स्टेट का उदय हुआ, नागरिकों को कुछ अधिकार दे दिए गए, कुछ ड्यूटीज दे दी गई, लेकिन और उसी समय में ये भी हो रहा है रिफॉर्मेशन के कुछ आखिरी समय में, कुछ आखिरी सेंचुरीज में, कि रिलीजन की जड़ें भी कमजोर हो रही हैं समाज पे। तो अब रिलीजन एज अ सोर्स ऑफ मोरालिटी खत्म हो गया है, लेकिन राइट्स आ गए हैं, ड्यूटीज आ गए हैं। तो एक खाली सी जगह है जहाँ पे धर्म और अधर्म का सोर्स नहीं है बेस करने के लिए। लेकिन इस किताब से अगर आप मनुष्य के स्वभाव के बारे में पढ़ें और ये जाने कि धर्म को भारतीय चिंतन या भारतीय दर्शन के अंदर प्रकृति के नियमों की तरह देखा गया है और मनुष्य के स्वभाव को उसकी जटिलता में देखा गया है, जहाँ वो 10 तत्वों से बना है, 4 पुरुषार्थ और 6 विकार, और उसमें भी ये संभावना है कि देश और काल में वो बदले जा सकते हैं। तो मुझे लगता है कि भारतीय चिंतन और दर्शन में मोरालिटी का सोर्स अभी भी ढूंढा जा सकता है अगर इस थ्योराइजेशन से हम जाएं। तो वो जो खाली जगह है रिलीजियस मोरालिटी, जहाँ पे पहले बेस होती थी, अब रिलीजन चला गया, मोरालिटी वहाँ बेस्ड नहीं है। तो पश्चिमी दर्शन में शायद मोरालिटी आप कहीं बेस नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन भारतीय दर्शन और चिंतन में अगर आप देखें तो धर्म की जो व्याख्या सर ने की है किताब में और मनुष्य के स्वभाव की जो की है, वहां से आपको मोरालिटी का कुछ एक परिभाषा मिल सकती है, एक सोर्स मिल सकता है। तीसरी बात मैं ये कहना चाहूंगी कि कई तरह के मेथड्स जो हम देखते हैं वेस्टर्न नॉलेज ट्रेडिशन में, उसमें मोनास्टिक, स्कॉलिस्टिक और ह्यूमैनिस्ट डोमिनेट रहे हैं एक तरीके से, लेकिन तीनों ही मुझे लगता है कि क्योंकि यथार्थ की बात भी इस किताब में है कि किस तरह रियलिटी को देखा जाए और किस तरह डिफरेंट ट्रेडिशंस ने रियलिटी को देखा है। तो ये 3 ट्रेडिशंस बहुत डोमिनेट रहे हैं और फिर स्कॉलिस्टिक ट्रेडिशन से जो आज का नॉलेज है, वो बहुत, आज का ज्ञान बहुत प्रभावित है। पर इन तीनों में एक चीज कॉमन रही है, एक तरह की समानता रही है कि ईश्वर को बहुत एक अखंड इकाई की तरह देखा, एक मोनोलिथिक गॉड की तरह देखा गया, और ये देखा गया कि ईश्वर ही है सब ज्ञान सृजन का स्रोत है और ईश्वर की बनाई हुई दुनिया में आप ज्ञान ढूंढ रहे हैं। Whereas अगर आप थोड़ा इंडियन नॉलेज ट्रेडिशन को उस तरह देखें जैसा किताब में बताया गया है, तो धर्म को प्रकृति के नियमों की तरह देखा गया है। यहाँ आपको यथार्थ के ज्यादा करीब जाने की पॉसिबिलिटीज दिखती हैं। वहाँ ईश्वर नॉलेज का सोर्स है, God's revelation is the knowledge in all these 3 traditions which were very dominant traditions at a point of time, at least till 16th century. जबकि यहाँ इंडियन ट्रेडिशन में, भारतीय ज्ञान चिंतन में धर्म को प्रकृति के नियमों की तरह देखा गया, और इसलिए मुझे लगता है यथार्थ की समझ भारतीय दर्शन के, अगर हम नॉलेज ट्रेडिशंस को यूज करें तो यथार्थ की समझ ज्यादा बेहतर हम बना सकते हैं देन द वेस्टर्न नॉलेज ट्रेडिशंस। चौथी बात मैं कहना चाहूंगी कि समाज अध्ययन के बारे में जब सर ने बात की है तो बताया कि भारतीय समाज अध्ययन में किस तरह बहुत सारी असमानताएं हैं, और उसी के अंदर एक तरह का डिवीजन ऑफ लेबर भी है। डिवीजन ऑफ लेबर इस तरीके से है कि कुछ लोग हैं जिनके ऊपर ये दारोमदार है कि वो सिर्फ अपने एक्सपीरियंसेस के बारे में, अपनी जाति विशेष के बारे में, अपने समूह विशेष के बारे में बात करेंगे, और कुछ लोग अवधारणाओं के बारे में या फिलोसफिकल क्वेश्चंस के बारे में बात करेंगे। इसको लार्जर कंटेक्स्ट में अगर देखने की कोशिश करें तो मुझे लगता है कि इसी तरह की असमानता पश्चिमी सभ्यता में या फिर पश्चिमी जो नॉलेज ट्रेडिशन है, वेस्टर्न पॉलिटिकल फिलोसफी है, इंडियन पॉलिटिकल फिलोसफी है, उनके बीच में जो शोधार्थी हैं वहां भी है कि ऐसा मान लिया जाता है कि जितने भी उत्तर औपनिवेशिक जो देश रहे हैं वहाँ से आने वाले जो शोधार्थी हैं वो नेटिव इन्फॉर्मेंट्स हैं, अगर आमिर अली सर का एनालिसिस यूज करें तो, कि वो सिर्फ अपनी आर्थिक या अपनी अस्मिता से जुड़े प्रश्नों के बारे में बात कर सकते हैं, अपनी आर्थिक या राजनीतिक समस्याओं के बारे में बात कर सकते हैं, लेकिन फिलोसफिकल नॉर्मेटिव क्वेश्चंस पे बात करने का और रिसर्च करने का जो अधिकार है वो एक तरह से सिर्फ कुछ वेस्टर्न स्कॉलर्स के पास ही है। तो ये असमानता भारतीय समाज अध्ययन में और यहाँ तो है ही, विश्वविद्यालयों में भी है, लेकिन लार्जर कंटेक्स्ट में देखिए तो ये ईस्ट और वेस्ट का बहुत बड़ा अंतर है, अभी तक भी है। अब 2-3 मेरे सवाल हैं सर से। पहला कि क्या हम इंडियन फिलोसफी को एक होमोजीनियस कैटेगरी की तरह देख रहे हैं, उसके बारे में सर पहले भी कुछ बोल चुके हैं, बट मुझे लगता है कि फॉर माई ओन अंडरस्टैंडिंग प्रोबेबली मुझे थोड़ी और समझदारी की जरूरत है इस पर। और या फिर हम किताब में ये कहने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि कुछ ऐसे केंद्र बिंदु हैं, जैसे पुरुषार्थ है, मानव स्वभाव के बारे में जो बात की गई है, विकार है, कुछ ऐसी बातें हैं जो भारतीय दर्शन में आप किसी भी ब्रांच को देख लें, सब जगह आपको कुछ समानताएं मिलेंगी, और उन समानताओं को लेकर कुछ इंडियन फिलोसफी के बारे में किताब में बात हो रही है, उसको एज अ होमोजेनियस कैटेगरी नहीं देखा जा रहा है। दूसरी बात, मुझे कुछ इस चीज पे कुछ संदेह है कि जिस समय में और जिस तरह के राजनीतिक परिप्रेक्ष्य में हम लोग रह रहे हैं, वहाँ कितना संभव होगा हमारे लिए ये कहना कि हिंदू धर्म से भारतीय दर्शन को ना जोड़ा जाए। ऐसे समय में हम हैं जहाँ गांधी और अम्बेडकर को भी अप्रोप्रिएट करने के लिए तैयार है एस्टैब्लिशमेंट के लोग, तो ये कितना संभव है हम लोग के पास। तीसरा सवाल मेरे पास ये है कि एक लास्ट चैप्टर में सर नव उदारवाद और धार्मिक आंदोलनों के बारे में बात करते हैं, तो उसमें 3-4 बातें तो हैं कि क्यों अभी भी एक तरह से धर्म की वापसी हो रही है भारतीय समाज के अंदर, और लोग इतना ज्यादा क्यों धर्म पे बात कर रहे हैं, इतना ज्यादा धर्म में क्यों है, सांप्रदायिकता इतनी क्यों है। एक कारण ये हो सकता है कि एशिया में जिस तरह से धर्म का उदय हुआ, एक कारण ये हो सकता है कि उपभोक्तावादी मानसिकता है लोगों के अंदर, विकार बढ़ रहे हैं, लोगों को कुछ दे नीड अ रेस्क्यू, दे नीड एन एस्केप एंड दे आर मूविंग टुवर्ड्स रिलीजन। बट क्या इसके बियॉन्ड भी कुछ है? इज देयर समथिंग मोर टू इट? बिकॉज आई डू फील देयर समथिंग मोर टू इट, बट आई कांट पुट माय फिंगर ऑन इट। मुझे ये नहीं पता कि क्या है और इसके आगे। तीसरी बात, लिबरेशन थियोलॉजी के बारे में डिस्कस किया गया है कि कुछ ऐसे धार्मिक आंदोलन जो शोषण और असमानताओं को खत्म करने के लिए किए जाएं, जैसे लैटिन अमेरिका में किए गए। मुझे लगता है कि लैटिन अमेरिका में नेशनलिज्म को शायद उस तरह इंस्ट्रूमेंटलाइज नहीं किया गया जैसे भारतीय संदर्भ में किया जा रहा है। तो इस बात की कितनी संभावना है कि अगर लिबरेशन थियोलॉजी जैसे कुछ धार्मिक आंदोलन अगर इस देश में आएंगे भी, तो उनके सफल होने की क्या संभावनाएं हैं हमारे पास? थैंक यू।
मैं खुद बोल लेता हूँ इस बार। मैं अभी भी इस किताब को समझ रहा हूँ, क्योंकि मुझे लगता है कि 10 से 15 सालों से मेरा हिंदी से नाता थोड़ा टूट गया है, और मैं वापस से हिंदी अब पढ़ रहा हूँ, इंजॉय कर रहा हूँ। तो मैं थोड़ा अभी भी ग्रास्प कर रहा हूँ इसको। तो बहुत सारी बातें जो मैं अभी बोलने वाला हूँ, ये हो सकता है कि इसमें 1-2 पॉइंट इंटरनल क्रिटिक है, लेकिन बहुत सारे एक्सटर्नल क्रिटिक्स भी हैं, और बाकी लोगों ने जो बातें कही हैं उसी पर मैं जोड़ते हुए अपनी बात रख रहा हूँ। ठीक है। For long, the logic of Indian social science theorizing has adhered to a phrase that Dipesh Chakravarti had first coined in provincializing Europe, and this was that Western thought is simultaneously indispensable yet inadequate for thinking through various life practices of non-European societies. Indispensable yet inadequate. In a recently published paper on Marxism, Kaviraj makes an interesting move by contending this formulation. So he changes this formulation, although he had agreed to this in his book on civil society, if you remember, wherein suggests that there is now a need to think and tease out regularities in non-European histories itself and construct theory or undertake analytical operations of a higher order whose reference is not European thought. To my mind, Maninder sir's book is an attempt and intervention in the same direction, wherein his plea is to generate theory, concepts, explanations which are not colored by European thinking. But his plea for indigeneity, as he explained, is not a plea for authenticity. And this is a difference that we need to make. He again and again says in his book. Now, this is how the book is situated. This is how I read the book. So I read the book in front of the text. This is how I read the book. So this is not, I don't think this is the authorial intended meaning or anything. So this is how I read the book. I think it is in this plea that this plea needs to be further fleshed out. So, for example, colonialism in some sense is the Purva Paksh against which Professor Thakur poses himself. And here I'll just complicate what he's saying, and I think in this way, as I've told him, that there are themes that needs further explication. I mean, that's why I said that somehow it feels like there is a second attendant volume that will come out after this. Because there are many themes that the book touches, and I think it opens up, and I think it needs further explication, and maybe he'll do that. So colonialism is that Purva Paksh, but colonialism, as several thinkers have pointed out, impacts different societies in different ways. So in some cases, colonial encounter can mean that indigenous population recedes into a cocoon. Here, the task would be to map knowledge traditions or systems which had remained impervious to changes that colonial modernity brought out. But can a similar thing be said about India? Has colonialism not broken our connection with the past in ways which it is just next to impossible to recover them? I mean, that is one question that needs to be thought about. Now, here to my mind, there are two kinds of argument that gets mixed in Professor Thakur's plea for an Indian social science. The first is recovering what has been lost due to colonialism. This essentially means studying ancient Indian philosophy and applying those concepts today. That is one sort of argument that he does in the book. But I think there is an argument that also goes at a second level. And this is like this. It can also mean, this going back can also mean thinking about a tradition of modern Indian thinking, which starts with Ram Mohan Roy and goes down to Gandhi, Ambedkar, Iqbal and Nehru, who at one level are using language of theory construction which is completely Western, but then thinking about issues and coming up with constructions which are unique to India. So take for example Ambedkar, who uses the language of liberalism but yet thinks about a structure of inequality and its remedies which are completely sui generis to India, which are unique to India. This is a body of thought which is completely different from Western thought, but not in the sense that the first proposition is Indian, not in that sense. So Indian can mean two different things. One, using resources from ancient Indian past. Two, using resources from modern Indian past. Now these two arguments need to be analytically differentiated because these two demands different things and has different challenges attached to it. So for example, the second one, I can be very controversial with the modern Indian thought, but I can't be with ancient Indian thought, precisely because I don't have so much capacity of Sanskrit and Persian. And even if I learn Sanskrit, would I be able to read Abhinav Gupta? Would I be able to read other texts? Panini? That is a question that needs to be thought about. In a similar way, that if you go to Max Muller Bhavan or a Goethe Institute and you learn German, can you read Philosophy of Right by Hegel in German? So this is a challenge that needs to be thought about. I think Professor Kaviraj has also pointed out this in several discussions that we were also having, I think, JNU Academics. But I think this needs to be thought about as to how we do that. Now the second is, and this is an external critique, that the book constantly talks about the Indian tradition and goes back to text. And this is, I think, in line with what Professor Pradhan and Pachidi has said, that constantly talks about texts of ancient India. But I feel there is a conspicuous absence of, and this is something I've told Professor Thakur as well, that it does not talk about experience and histories of southern India. so on which a lot of work has been done. So say scholars like K. Nilakantha Shastri, David Shulman, Sajjay Subramaniam, these are people who have worked on southern India, ancient Indian past of southern India. I think that can be included. Also, I think there is a lack. I think since the book is sort of targeting two audiences at the same time, one a larger intervention on the Indian social science thinking के रियाल में और दूसरा एक generic audience के रियाल में, I think because of that constraint he is not able to include, or I don't know, but there is, if there is, this debate needs to be extended. I think there needs to include in the modern Indian tradition works that have been done on the conceptualization of concepts, historical concepts such as Samaj, Desh, Unnati, Rajniti. I mean, these are concepts on which work has been done, say by Professor Mohinder Singh, Sudipto Kaviraj and others. So I think that needs to be included. And in this sense, I would say that Bhargava's political secularism or Chatterjee's political society should also be considered as products of Indian thinking. In this sense. Okay, towards the last point about the inward gaze, I think the point that Chetnadi made, I think while there is much talk about civilizational ethos in the book, civilizational shadows are given a minimal space. I mean, which is understandable, but since your binna and normative pura push hai book ke piche, lekin I think that needs to be included. I mean, if for social science theorizing, I think something like say authority या kinship पर मैं आप जिस तरह से सोचता हूँ, अगर ancient India में क्या theorization था authority या kinship को लेकर, वो अगर आज inform कर रहा है Indian voter कैसे vote कर रहा है, तो I think that needs to be culled out. And this is a related question to the debate on philosophy versus practice, and my own thinking about Indian philosophy. So while Ambedkar was wrong about questioning the pluralist nature of Indian philosophy, that he thought that Indian philosophy is just like this, and he was wrong in that. But he was not wrong, he was completely right when he was thinking about the practice of that political thought, that body of philosophical thinking, that it was that it led to a homogeneous dominating nature of political practice, and that needs to be excavated. Lastly, I mean, any discussion on human nature, I think this is a debate that also I think have taken place in CPS Young Scholars Conferences, when somebody presented on, I think, Marxist concept of human nature or something like that, and I remember that some of us had a long debate that whether post Althusser something like this can be done. Like, we need to really think about that. That can we, because Althusser sort of destabilizes or demolishes the whole argument about essentially thinking about human nature. So if we need to think about human nature, we need to engage with that thinking, we need to make our way through that. So that was my plea.
Thank you so much. I think I'll start with the question that specifically affects me in contemporary academia, which is the question of big picture. I mean, we are all specialists in our own way, and we tend to ignore the larger reality that is there. So the book is engaging in this process of, So book is engaging in this process of understanding what reality is in the larger sense. The gamut is wide enough to give us a sense of what big picture is. It incorporates aspects from, definitely we know, philosophy, political economy. I mean, people haven't spoken on this aspect, that the author is engaging with the question of economy there. He's engaging with the question of capital there, maybe in his last and middle chapters. I think I will focus more on the question about Indian philosophy. I mean, what Indian philosophy is in that sense. Like, is it only about transcendence? Like, the biggest critique about Indian philosophy that author is trying to sort of challenge in a way is that Indian philosophy is not just about transcendental aspects of reality. It is about immanence. And in that, he is being supported recently by, I would like to quote Kaviraj again. I mean, Kaviraj is quoted many times, but I think it's worth quoting. In his recent article, which is about In Search of Paradise, where he's trying to argue that, Vaishnav tradition, I mean, he's using a song sung by Pandit Jasraj, which is Ka Karu Vaikunt Mein Jaye, Jahan Nahi Gopi, Jahan Nahi Gwal, Jahan Nahi Jal Jamuna. So he's using that song, Kaviraj is using that song to argue that this song in certain aspects of Vaishnav tradition is all about immanence, is all about suffering in this world. I mean, it's, what can we do? What will we do of Vaikunt, which is Swarg? What will we do of transcendence? If the transcendence is not going to change my contemporary or immediate reality. So the author is trying to engage with such questions. I think that is more important. Apart from that, I feel that there is definitely, people have spoken about it, that there is a thorough discussion of what human nature is. I mean, using Supriyo's argument that there is no scope of understanding human nature after Althusser. But my point is,
I'm just saying that we need to engage.
Yeah.
That we need to incorporate what he's saying.
yeah. But I think that human nature debate is, I mean, I'm not using Supriyo's argument, but I think human nature debate is so broad. We need to understand that human nature cannot be constrained to one philosophical tradition, including Marxism. I mean, an author is doing that when he's using maybe thinkers like psychologists, contemporary psychologists like I'm forgetting the name. Carl Jung, no, the other contemporary one. So. No, the one who has written this. Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. Daniel Kahneman. So, I mean, the author has used such thinkers, such psychologists, to argue that one needs to go beyond the contemporary or the conventional understanding of social sciences, where we tend to look into just, traditional thinkers. Like, we need to just go into the corpus of what Gandhians have said, what Marxists have said, what Ambedkarites have said. Why can't we make our corpus of social science much broader? Why? I mean, the author is engaging with philosophy of science and psychology and that aspect, and I firmly believe that social science needs to be opened up. And this is not a recent argument. I mean, American Political Science Association in 1930s, when quantum mechanics was discovered, they had said that time that we need to take quantum mechanics seriously, because quantum mechanics is telling us something really insightful about reality. But our social science, which author is trying to argue, that our social science is stuck in the Newtonian or, preferably Einsteinian understanding of physics and reality. So I'm not trying to argue that social science should be reduced to the ontology of science, but there should be a dialogue between what physical ontology is and what social ontology is. How much of time, I mean, we can't be ignorant of what is going in the, I mean, if, for instance, when physicists are saying that space and time are doomed, and we are focusing all the, I mean, I'm not saying we should not focus on historical conception of time or social conception of time, but there should be some engagement between what the reality or ontology that sciences are telling us and what is coming from the social science background. There should be engagement, there should be dialogue. And author is doing that. Author is just not trying to engage in dialogue between different traditions within social science, but trying to sort of delve into some kind of dialogue between social and natural sciences, which is the unique aspect. Apart from that, coming to the question of religion, I mean, and that's the most important, one of the most important aspect of the book. I think religion is something which we've been discussing, I mean, the group that we have been discussing about religion a lot, and we believe that religion, like sexuality, is part of our being. And religion is not a monolith in any sense. we tend to, when we talk about religion, we tend to assume that religion is about communities, about identity. Definitely there is an aspect of religion that is about community. But religion is a layered phenomena. It has ontological layers to it, which means that religion is also about psychological dispositions. Religion also incorporates ontic components, which are basically spiritual components. It also, gives us an imagination to fathom reality which sciences might not be able to give us. So religion is a complex phenomena with layers to it, and author is delving into that. And author is trying to argue that philosophy and religion dichotomy shouldn't be seen as sacrosanct. And that was the case in Indian philosophical tradition, where there was no dichotomy between what was philosophical and what was religious. Both were one. There could be some problem of that. One can definitely go into that, conflating religion with philosophy can be problematic. But I have, we have discussed, but again, you need to ask that how is author trying to engage with contemporary work on religion and secular, where people are trying to sort of completely negate the categories themselves. They're saying that both religion and secular are modern categories, and secular is nothing but a corollary of religion, which means that religion as a category got constituted in a certain spatio-temporal context, which means it constituted in a colonial framework, and secular is just a corollary to that. This is my question, that how does he see this debate of politics of religion making? And lastly, I think, coming back to the limitation of the work, I feel that more could have been done on understanding the interplay of materiality and ideality, which means that more could have been done on this understanding of the process, that how material, social, economic conditions affects religion, affects our religious identities, affects our psychological dispositions, and the other way around. So I'm not arguing for a reductionist or a deterministic argument here, which means that only the material condition, the neoliberalism is there, so that's why you're becoming more religious. No, something is more going on, as Chetana also asked. So author could have sort of delved more into it, maybe the process, or could have taken more case studies, anything like contemporary Hindutva or any fundamentalist religious movement, to delve into the process of how materiality and ideality interplays and produces phenomena of religion and secularism. So these are my main questions and arguments. Thank you so much.
सबसे पहले तो मैं इस ढलते हुए विश्वविद्यालय के दौर में, जबकि राजनीति खुद ही अपनी स्वायत्तता खोती जा रही है, वह कहीं और से निर्देशित, नियंत्रित और संचालित हो रही है, उसमें ज्ञान की राजनीति पर बात करना और उस पर इतना श्रम साध्य काम करना और अपनी हंसने, गाने, रोने, दुख सुख की भाषा में हमारे सामने रखना, मैं बहुत मुबारकबाद देना चाहता हूँ प्रोफेसर मंजना ठाकुर साहब को। और अधिकांश बातें पूर्व के वक्ताओं के द्वारा आ चुकी हैं, किताब की खूबियों पर भी और जो कुछ नहीं है उस पर भी। यह सुविधा है सोशल साइंस में कि आप यह कह लें कि क्या क्या नहीं है इसमें। ह्यूमैनिटीज में भी है, लेकिन आप शेक्सपियर के सामने रोना नहीं रो सकते कि आपने नॉवेल क्यों नहीं लिखा, प्लेज ही क्यों लिखी। पल्लवन की क्लास जो है गोपाल प्रसाद दुबे की बहुत हुई हाई स्कूल में, मैंने सारी अटेंड की और संक्षेपण की सारी क्लासेस बंक कर दी। तो आप मुझे टोक दीजिएगा अगर मैं लंबा बोलने लगूं। ज्ञान को लेकर हर धर्म ग्रंथ में आरंभ में ही बहुत नैतिकता और मर्यादा वाली भावना के साथ उसके मानने वाले, उसके अनुसरण करने वालों को एक तरह से इस बात के लिए कहा गया है कि आप पढ़ो। कुरान शरीफ का पहला ही वाक्य इकरा। और हिंदू धर्म ग्रंथों में चूंकि यहाँ बहुत तरह की दुविधाएं हैं और इतने विकल्प हैं कि आपको लगता है कि पहले अगर मैं विद्यार्थी हूँ तो सरस्वती की वंदना कर लूँ, लेकिन मेथड तो ये कहता है कि पहले गणेश को याद किया जाए। तो धर्म से मेरा जो मोह भंग है वो इस वजह से नहीं हुआ कि मैं धार्मिक व्यक्ति नहीं था, बल्कि बहुत कायदे से पूजा पाठ करना चाहता था। और मैं आपको बताऊं सर कि दुर्गा सप्तशती की कीलक, कवच, अर्गला ये सब लगभग याद हो गए, लेकिन मोह भंग तब शुरू हुआ जब माँ ने संतोषी माता का व्रत रखना शुरू किया और उसमें शुक्रवार को खट्टा खाने की मनाही थी। लेकिन सिर्फ खट्टा खाने वाले को ही पाप नहीं लगता, बल्कि आपके रिश्तेदार, नाते, मित्र सबके लिए दंड संहिता में कोई न कोई प्रावधान था। और जब कोई मनोकामना पूरी हो जाती है तो उद्यापन होता है उसमें, और उस रोज भी अमरूद बहुत पसंद था, खा लिया। तो ये जो बचपन से एक डर का वातावरण और हमारी मनस्थिति में इतने तरह के कंफ्यूजन से रोज बरोज टकराता था कि हमें लगा कि यह बहुत लिबरेटिव नहीं है। और इसलिए कम्युनिज्म से जब हमारा साक्षात्कार हुआ तो एक स्तर पर हमें लगा कि ये एक ऐसी जगह है जहाँ थोड़ी राहत है, जहाँ कोई बहुत दबाव नहीं है, जहाँ हम अपने मन की चीजें कर सकते हैं। ठीक बात है, बहुत रॉन्ग डूइंग नहीं करेंगे, उतनी नैतिकता का आभास तो आपको हो जाता है। तो सब यही कहते हैं। आपकी किताब के शुरू में इसकी भूमिका में ही इस बात का जिक्र है, सा विद्या या विमुक्त, जो आपको लिबरेट करे वही विद्या है, वही शिक्षा है, वही इल्म तालीम है। सा विद्या या शास्ति, जो कहा कि सिस्टम का पार्ट हो जाते हैं लोग, मतलब जो आपका शमन करे, जो तमाम तरह की कृत्रिमता से, वायवीयता से आपको मुक्ति दिला सके और आप पर नियंत्रण रखे, थोड़ा अंकुश है। आप देख लें गुरु ग्रंथ साहिब की तरफ पलटे, सिखिज्म की तरफ, तो बोलते हैं विद्या विचारी ता परोपकारी। और अब विचारी और उसको बड़ा ही पोलाइट सेंस में कि भाई आपके अंदर ह्यूमिलिटी भी आए। वहीं आप जाएंगे अरबिक में तो कहते हैं कि उतलुल इल्म वलो काना बिस्सीन। इल्म हासिल करने के लिए अगर चीन भी जाना पड़े तो जाना चाहिए, मतलब अरब से बहुत दूर भी। उसको बड़ा ही पायस और बड़ी सैंक्टिटी के साथ बरतने की बात की गई। इसीलिए जब पहला अक्षर जो आदमी सीखता है, बच्चा, शिशु, तो उसमें भी हमारे यहाँ बड़ा ही उसको धार्मिक रूप से रस्म की तरह कराया जाता है। और पर्सियन में कहते हैं बया दामने इल्मगीर उस्तुवार की इल्मत रसानत बदारुद करार, कि आओ बया दामने इल्मगीर, इल्म के दामन को बहुत मजबूती से पकड़ो, क्योंकि यही वह है जो आपको एमेंसिपेट करेगा, सेल्वेट करेगा। और इन सब के बावजूद जो आज हम देखते हैं इतने वर्षों की सभ्यता के बाद, कि एक अनास्था का वातावरण, अनास्था उस सेंस में नहीं, एक अविश्वास का वातावरण, और जो कहते हैं कि श्रद्धावान लभते ज्ञानम, वही ज्ञान को हासिल कर सकता है जो श्रद्धावान है, कंप्लीट सरेंडर, जो इंडियन फिलॉसफी है। तभी गुरु भी प्रसन्न होंगे और तभी शायद उनकी अच्छी बातें भी आप उसका रिसेप्शन करेंगे। तो जिस ह्यूमन सब्जेक्टिविटीज की बात इस किताब में है, एक ही टेक्स्ट को अलग अलग आदमी अपने अपने लोकस, अपनी समाजी, सियासी, सांस्कृतिक परवरिश के चलते अलग अलग स्तर पर रिसीव करता है, चाहे वो ओरल कंपोजिशन हो, रिटन कंपोजिशन हो। किसी एक व्यक्ति की तकरीर में आपको कई बार लगेगा कि ये मैस्कुलिनिटी चेरिश कर रहा है, कई बार आपको लगेगा कि ये तो नेशनलिज्म का एक्सप्रेशन है, कई बार आपको लगेगा ये तो दकियानुसी बातें कर रहा है, पुनरुत्थानवाद को और ज्यादा मजबूती प्रदान कर रहा है। तो ये ऑथोरियल पोजीशन ही नहीं है, एक ऑथर ही उसको एंजॉय नहीं करता है, एक ऑडिटर या राइटर ही नहीं, बल्कि एक पाठक की भी अपनी एजेंसी है, ऑडियंस की भी अपनी एजेंसी है। उसी बात को पढ़ के या सुनकर कोई अनुयायी बन जाता है, कोई प्रशंसक होता है, कोई आपका मुरीद हो जाता है, और आजकल तो फैनेटिक की हद तक भी लोग बनते हैं। गांधी क्राउड को मैस में तब्दील करते थे। फिर पब्लिक बनाते थे, उसी प्रक्रिया में जो सब कुछ जानती थी, वेल इन्फॉर्म्ड, और धीरे धीरे वह एक संजीदा नागरिक में तब्दील होता था। हमने देखा कि बचपन से पहली क्लास से लेकर आज पीएचडी की थीसिस के सबमिट होने तक एक डर हमारे मन में होता है। सबके मन में नहीं होता होगा, लेकिन ये हम जहां से आते हैं वहां ये होता है कि हमको परफॉर्म करना है। पिताजी को एक लकीर में रिजल्ट चाहिए, क्यों चाहिए पता नहीं। तो ये जो ज्ञान को लेकर हम किसी मेथड की जरूरत नहीं है, किसी फूल की खुशबू को महसूस करने के लिए, उसके सौंदर्य को आत्मसात करने के लिए। लेकिन कहा कि खुशबू को फैलने का बहुत शौक है, मगर मुमकिन नहीं हवाओं से रिश्ता किए बगैर। और मेथड वहां आ जाता है कि बाग में जाने के आदाब हुआ करते हैं, किसी तितली को फूलों से न उड़ाया जाए। अब उसमें जिसकी परवरिश इस तरह से हुई है कि उसको बड़ा ही पोलाइट, बड़ा उसको समझाया गया है कि ये तहजीब याफ्ता ऐसे होता है, तो नहीं तितली को उड़ाएगा। लेकिन थोड़ा उच्छृंखल स्वभाव का होगा या उसमें उसको आनंद आएगा, उसका इंटेंशन नहीं है उसको नुकसान पहुंचाने, लेकिन पड़ेगा। तो आपको ये जो नेस्टी ब्रूटिस कॉम्प्लेक्स आदमी के बारे में कहा है, हमें खुद भी नहीं पता चलता है कि कितने स्तरों पर हम किन किन विकारों से उलझे हुए हैं। और एक रिसीवर जो है और एक सेंडर जो है किसी मैसेज का, वो जो कम्युनिकेशन में हम लोग पढ़ते हैं कि सहृदयता का सिद्धांत, वननेस की स्थिति जब आती है तो उसमें कोई कम्युनिकेशन में लॉस नहीं होता। पूरी बात वहां तक हम जिस रूप में प्रेषित करना चाहते हैं, सामने वाले उसी रूप में उसको ग्रहण करता है। तो ये गुणग्राह्यता जो है और ये जो ग्रहणशीलता है, रिसेप्टिवनेस, ये बहुत ही कलेक्टिव प्रोसेस है। और एक टीचर होते थे इंग्लिश लिटरेचर के JNU कॉलेज भागलपुर में, अखिलेश्वर ठाकुर। वो जब हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंग्लिश लिटरेचर पढ़ाते थे सर, तो हम लोग लिखते थे, तो बोलते नहीं, इसके लिए डेविड एचेस है, रोबर्ट है, हडसन है, सारी किताबें मौजूद हैं। जब हम बोलें तो आप सुनो, जब आप लिखेंगे तो जो प्लेजर ऑफ लिसनिंग है वो इंटरप्ट होगा। तो मुझे लगता है कि हर आदमी के सोचने का, उसको रिमिनेट करने का अपना अपना तरीका है। किसी फिल्म को आप देखते हैं, किसी नॉवेल को पढ़ते हैं, जो सस्पेंशन ऑफ डिसबिलीफ वाली बात है, और हालात जब आपको बहुत तोड़ता है तो आप सस्पेंशन ऑफ डिसबिलीफ को ला ही नहीं पाते। पहले से आपको लगता है ये हो रहा, फिल्म को एंजॉय नहीं कर पाते। तो मैं समझता हूं कि यह किताब, मैं अभी मानता हूं कि ये मरुस्थल में ओएसिस की मानंद है मेरे लिए, क्योंकि एक साथ इतनी चीजें, और इसमें मेरी तमाम दुविधाएं, जब मैं इसको उलट रहा होता हूँ, पढ़ता हूँ, तो कई चीज मैं खुद ब खुद इसमें एक संवाद की स्थिति में जाता हूँ। इन पर्सन फिजिकली मणिन्द्रनाथ ठाकुर नहीं मौजूद रहते हैं, लेकिन लगता है कि कोई हम बैठ के एक पब्लिक स्फेयर कोई है और वहाँ 4-5 लोग हम लोग अपनी अपनी दुविधाओं को साझा कर रहे हैं। किताब की अपनी लिमिटेशन हो सकती है, लेकिन इसका स्टाइल मुझे पसंद आया है, जो बेकन वगैरह एफोरिस्टिक स्टाइल करते थे। कई जगह छोटे छोटे वाक्य हैं, और वो कहते थे कि some books are to be tasted and others to be swallowed and few others to be chewed and digested। मैं समझता हूँ कि एक साथ चखने, निगलने, चबाने और पचाने की कैटेगरी में इस किताब को मैं रख सकता हूँ। और इसलिए नहीं कि आप हमारे सामने हैं, मैं समझता हूँ कि जितने तरह की दुविधाओं का हमने सामना किया है बचपन से अब तक, और तब लगता है कि संस्कृति, सभ्यता बहुत बहुत आसानी से और सुलझी हुई चीज नहीं है। इसमें हम इस तरह से कई बार खोजते हैं उत्तर और कई बार नहीं भी पाते हैं। जो गांधी कहते थे कि एक विचार यात्रा है, निरंतरता में चल रही है, और मेरे जो ख्याल हैं आखिरी किसी भी विषय पर, उसी को हमारा अंतिम हमारी राय मानी जाए। तो ये पाश्चात्य दर्शन और जिसको एशियाई या भारतीय दर्शन आप कह रहे हैं, उसमें भी कोई मैं बहुत अंतर्विरोध की स्थिति नहीं पाता हूँ, सिवाय इसके कि हमें यह लगे कि हमारे यहाँ माने वर्स्ट ऑफ द ईस्ट एंड द बेस्ट ऑफ द वेस्ट वाली अगर संकल्पना या कहने धारणा के आधार पर हम ना देखें तो मुझे बहुत उसमें परेशानी नहीं नजर आ रही है। मैं खत्म कर रहा हूँ इस बात के साथ कि सेकुलरिज्म पर बहुत अभी अलग अलग तरह से बात की गई है। 1982 में जो किशन पटनायक ने लिखा, मैं वही कोट करना चाहता हूँ कि हिंदू होकर द्विजों की या अपनी जाति की राजनीति करना, हिंदू समाज को बदलने की कोई नीति या कार्रवाई न चलाना, यह अखिल भारतीय राजनीतिक दलों की बेईमानी है जो अपने को सेक्युलर कहते हैं। उनमें से किसी के पास धर्म व्यवस्था या जाति व्यवस्था को बदलने का कोई कार्यक्रम नहीं है, इसलिए सेक्युलर शब्द का उल्टा अर्थ हो गया है। सब धर्मों की रूढ़िवादिता को प्रोत्साहित करना ही सेक्युलर समझा जाता है और ये हम इस फेनोमेनन को आज देख रहे हैं, कोई उस पर बात नहीं करने को तैयार है। एक मेरी जिज्ञासा है जो मैं आपके सामने रखूं, हो सकता है आपने विचार किया हो कभी, भारतीय जनतंत्र पर पुनः चिंतन, इसको भी क्या आप मानवीय विकार की दृष्टि से देख पाते हैं या देखा है कि उसके पहले मैं उल्लेख कर दूं कि हम कैसे रिएक्ट करते हैं किसी सिचुएशन में। प्रभास जोशी ने एक बार कहा कि ब्राह्मणों के पास नैसर्गिक प्रतिभा होती है, और इसको सुनकर कोई अनवाइड हो सकता है, किसी को लगेगा क्या बोल दिया, लेकिन मैंने उस पर विचार किया स्थिर होकर। तो जब आपके पास सांस्कृतिक पूंजी या फिर ज्ञान का एक्सेस आपके पास 3-4 पीढ़ियों से होता है, निश्चित रूप से उसका फायदा अभी मौजूदा पीढ़ी को मिलता है, कई चीजों से, उलझनों से वो बच जाते हैं। लेकिन जिनके पास वह नहीं रहा है, उनको कोई यह बताने वाला नहीं होता है कि आपको कैसे बिहेव करना है। विनोद कांबली और सचिन तेंदुलकर इक्वली टैलेंटेड थे, साथ आए, लेकिन तेंदुलकर के पास आचरेकर था यह बताने के लिए तुम न बोलो, तुम्हारा बल्ला बोले, और विनोद कांबली को यह कोई नहीं कहने वाला था ये सलीका, करीना, शऊर इस तरह का हो कि आप कंट्रोवर्सी में नहीं जाओ। हाँ, तो मैं कह रहा था कि प्रभास जोशी की जो यह बात है उसको उसी संदर्भ में मैं देखता हूँ। सर, मैं ये कह रहा था कि 6 प्रधानमंत्री इस देश में कांग्रेस ने दी और उन 6 ने मिलकर, और उसमें कई लोग स्वाधीनता आंदोलन से निकले हुए थे, लगभग 57 वर्षों तक इस देश को चलाया। अच्छा बुरा, कमियां खामियां रही होंगी। समाजवादियों ने भी 6 प्रधानमंत्री दिए, 3 बार केंद्र में सरकार बनाई, तीनों बार हमारा काम एक प्रधानमंत्री से नहीं चला, बावजूद इसके 5 बरस की मियाद किसी ने नहीं पूरी की। क्या वह ईर्ष्या थी? एक दूसरे को के प्रति सहिष्णुता का भाव था? कोई असुरक्षा का भाव था? और ये सिर्फ सियासत में नहीं, अभी किसी को बुकर प्राइज मिल जाएगा, देखिए उसकी टांकीचाई शुरू हो जाती है। तो ये कुछ बातें थी जो मुझे आपसे साझा करनी थी, और जटिल चीजों को सरल बनाकर पेश करना ये बड़ा मुश्किल काम होता है। मेरे टीचर थे, हैं बल्कि आनंद प्रधान साहब, वो कहते थे लिखना लिखने से आता है, पढ़ना पढ़ने से आता है। इल्म की इब्तिदा है हंगामा, इल्म की इंतहा है खामोशी। तो इसी के साथ मैं समाप्त करता हूँ और इस किताब को और चाव से पढ़ूंगा, फिर इस पर मैं
समय काफी हो चुका है, तो मैं प्रोफेसर ठाकुर से बोलूंगा कि आप थोड़ा संक्षेप में, और यू वांट टू कीप इट whatever has been said, or you can just, हाँ मुझे लग रहा है कि हाँ, and there is tea and snacks outside, so please have it and then only. I mean, we'll also like it to open it for audience. I mean, at least 2-3 questions we need. हाँ, मैं वही कह रहा हूँ. Then you respond. Yeah, I think because yeah. So I think there is a question there. Varun bhai, I will come to you. there is a question there.
सर, हर दौर की धर्म की राजनीति होती है, ज्ञान की राजनीति होती है, और आपने आज के ज्ञान की राजनीति के ऊपर लिखा है, लेकिन मैं इतिहास पढ़ने का इच्छुक हूँ, तो अलग अलग जगह हिस्ट्री को ट्रेस कर रहा हूँ। आपने 45 पेज नंबर पर लिखा है कि इस्लाम के आगमन के बाद संस्कृत नीचे चली गई और कॉलोनियलिज्म आने के बाद वो और नीचे अगर मैं कॉलोनियलिज्म आने के बाद उसका पराभव हो गया। लेकिन उसी दौर में अगर हम पब्लिक स्पेयर को देखते हैं तो वो कौन था जिससे तुलसीदास टकरा रहा था, वो कौन था जिससे कबीर टकरा रहा था, और वो कौन था जिससे द्विवेदी हिंदी में उपन्यास लिखकर उपनिषद को प्रेजेंट करने से टकरा रहे थे। और अगर संस्कृत का ह्रास हुआ है तो क्या वो अपनी राजनीति के कारण हुआ है, वह नहीं बदल रही थी इस कारण हुआ है, या किसी एक्सटर्नल इफेक्ट के कारण हुआ है? और भी कई सवाल है, लेकिन अभी
थैंक यू
इसका एक लाइन पे बोल दें।
हाँ हाँ
Actually, I'm quoting Pollock. This is not my argument. I'm just saying that Pollock has this argument.
Shalin.
And I have some question on that. I don't agree with Pollock. I don't think that this decline is so simplistic. Actually, the dialogue is that.
और हिमांशु है वहाँ? हिमांशु सिर्फ एक सवाल।
हाँ सर, मेरा ये सवाल है कि मैंने अभी किताब पूरी नहीं पढ़ी, मैं भूमिका प्रकथन और पहले चैप्टर को मैं पढ़ रहा था। उसमें जहाँ आप भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा जब कहते हैं तो हमारे सामने ये समस्या आती है कि इस ज्ञान परंपरा का अर्थ क्या है, उन कौन से स्पेसिफिक टेक्स्ट या स्पेसिफिक नॉलेज ट्रेडिशंस हैं जिन्हें आप इस ज्ञान परंपरा के तत्व के रूप में समझते हैं। दूसरा, इसके साथ आपने बहुत सचेत रूप से ये चीज लिखी है कि हम ज्ञान परंपरा के बारे में बात करते हुए कभी भी इसे बहुत एक राष्ट्रवादी चिंतन न करें, पर जिस तरह के समय में हम रह रहे हैं, जैसा चेतना ने सवाल किया कि एक विशेष तरह की सभ्यतावादी सांस्कृतिक चेतना राजनीति को आज निर्धारित कर रही है और उसकी जो झंडा बरदारी है, उससे हम इस तरह की चिंतन परंपरा को कैसे बचाएंगे कि वो उसे कोऑप्ट न करे, उसे ओवरटेक न करे। दूसरा मेरा ये जो जरूरी सवाल था आपसे सर कि वैकल्पिक ज्ञान परंपरा जो भारतीय चिंतन के अंदर, भारतीय नॉलेज के अंदर अगर हम कहें तो है, जैसा ट्राइबल नॉलेज है और ये, तो उन्हें आप कहाँ लोकेट करते हैं इस तरह के ज्ञान और चिंतन परंपरा में?
राम, एक मिनट पहले आप जानना चाहते हैं, पहले बोलना चाहते हैं?
Not necessarily.
बोलिए।
I can come after.
मेरा एक छोटा सा सवाल है। मेरा सवाल है कि ये जो एक्लेक्टिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग है, मतलब आपके क्लासेस से वो निकल के बहुत बार आया और हमेशा बहस वो चलता रहा है, तो ये एक्लेक्टिसिज्म का आपका एक बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग एक नोट है। और जैसे कि अभिजीत पाठक को भी देखें तो उनका भी एक बहुत एक्लेक्टिक नोट है जहाँ पे ह्यूमनिस्ट बातचीत पे एग्रीमेंट हो सकता है सबका। लेकिन बहुत बार जो ऐतिहासिक एक नोट है या फिर इतिहास को कैसे मेथोडोलॉजिकली इस्तेमाल किया जा रहा है, वहाँ पे किस चीज़ को प्लूरल माना जा रहा है और किस चीज़ को आप डाइवर्सिटी में इंक्लूड कर रहे हैं। जैसे कि इवन अगर हम लोग एक छोटा सा एग्जांपल ले लें कि अभी पूरा सीए एनआरसी का जो बहस चला, तो वो उसमें जो आइडिया ऑफ ट्राइबल है और वहाँ पे जो आइडिया ऑफ थ्रेट अगेंस्ट ट्राइबल है, वो एक, तो वहाँ पे भी एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो सकता है कि वहाँ पे एक एपिस्टेमिक एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो सकता है कि क्या हमारा वे ऑफ लाइफ है और क्या थ्रेटन हो रहा है। तो वहाँ पे रोमांटिसाइज्ड एक जो अगर वर्जन हम लोग बोले कि ये नॉलेज सिस्टम बहुत अच्छा है और इसको हम लोग छोड़ रहे हैं और इसको हम ले रहे हैं, वहाँ पे बहुत खतरा हो सकता है। तो मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि एक्लेक्टिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग ह्यूमनिस्ट तौर पे बिल्कुल चेरिश किया जा सकता है, लेकिन मेथोडोलॉजिकली वहाँ पे बहुत सारे दिक्कतें हैं।
Thank you so much, Manindra and all respected friends. I am joining this without not having read the book.
Please use them.
Thank you so much, Professor Thakur and all respected friends. I have not read the book, just listening to the conversation, a few queries. One is in terms of understanding human nature. This is very important, Purushartha and Vikara. And to Professor Pradhan, as Manindra has already said, this is not limited to Hindus only. The challenge before us is how do we bring these elements into a planetary understanding. Now there is idea of human nature also from Western tradition. if you look at that, what gives primal focus here is power. But as there was mentioned about Shraddha, but the notion of Shraddha in Bhagavad Gita is not surrender. Shraddha is quest. So therefore, another related question is that how do we open up the metaphysics of assumptions? For example, we have taken for granted that power is the end all and beyond of life. It is as much an assumption as Shraddha is. So the possibility for opening of our social inquiry, civilizational inquiry, is to what are the heuristic ways we can look at all societies and histories with dialogue with the Purushartha tradition, Dharma for example. Now what would be a resonance of Dharma in Islam? In Christianity, I am co-editing a book called Towards a New Dharma of Peace Building. So this is one thing. But in this Purushartha and Vikara, my query is that what is our engagement with three guna? I wonder whether Professor Thakur has engaged with that, Sattva, Raja and Tama. But this three guna, the idea of the three, not only in Indic tradition, but all tradition, three is not just a number. Three is an invitation for an open-ended plural. Then about secularism, as Professor Pradhan has rightly challenged us, we need to understand religion not with its assumptions. But then secular is the only category of thinking outside the frame. My submission is that the whole frame of the religious and secular misses a very important reality and critique, that is the spiritual. And there is in Indian tradition, as well as in all religious tradition, look at Judaism for example. If you read Karl Jasper's The Idea of Axial Edge Civilization, now all this axial edge civilization which has produced this world religion, they have a dimension of power, but as well as an open spiritual quest. And in terms of engagement with thoughts, what I heard, that it seems that there is no deep engagement with Islamic thinkers in this moment, because and if we read Amartya Sen's latest biography, Home in the World, he talks about Khitimoy Sen. And he has written a book called Bharatavarsha Hindu Musliman Jukta Sadhana. And I'm just wondering if Professor Thakur has also engaged with Islamic thinkers, poets, and when they are writing, they are not just writing about Islam, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, for example. And my final one or two query is that if the challenge is not authenticity, but indigeneity, but the challenge is also, can we have a different realization of authenticity, and authenticity without boundaries in that sense, and authenticity which is not entrapped within a sense of initial assertion. And listening to all these speakers, I was thinking that the whole contemporary thought also does not end with Gandhi, Ambedkar and Tagore, but even in that period, one name which I have not yet heard is Sri Aurobindo. And Sri Aurobindo was also a kind of a open-ended seeker of Indian traditions. He has written on the Vedas and others. So these are, and my final query is, as it has been mentioned, that there is very little dialogue with the South Indian tradition. Therefore, the whole idea of Bharatiya Chintan has an indispensability of regional imagination. And all these regional imaginations, for example, here in North India, now if you look at Kushan Empire, in Kushan Empire, Mathura was not at the center, as you have mentioned, Uzbekistan. If you come to Odisha, now Odisha is not just a region of India. It had planetary or cosmopolitan and inter-regional dimension with East Asia similarly. So we need to open up what we call as Bharatiya Chintan to this kind of regionality, and each of the regionality also has its own transnational histories and cosmopolitan imaginations.
Any other queries or questions?
I just have
Okay,
I mean,
please.
it's just related to what Professor has said. I mean, I would be so glad if Professor Thakur can elaborate his concept of emergentist universal, because that is so important. Because there's been debate that it is different from co-contamination or hybridization. And I have always had this question that if we are not arguing for essentialism or authentic Indian tradition or authentic Indian regional boundaries, then how can we conceptualize an other, which is like the Purva Paksh? If there is no othering of that sort, then co-contamination, isn't it a better sort of proposition and philosophical position than emergentist universal, which Professor Thakur is mentioning? So if you can elaborate on that.
With this, I hand over to you, Professor Thakur. You just pick and choose whatever you want to respond, because it's too much, and we can take the conversation outside as well. That's all.
Thank you very much for a range of questions. I'm not obliged to answer, as I said. This is your problem. At first, what I've done is I have articulated your problem in my language, and probably I'm trying to create a samvad between this very elite intellectual crowd and the common people of India. Upagam is an exception, I guess. Upagam, probably we use it so frequently in political science, and Hindi people don't use it so frequently, therefore it came without any definition. And I'm against definition, so that's not my problem. Definition is a very positivist thing. It's emerged with modern science, actually, and that creates big problem. That you want to, no matter how much you define, everything will be left out. So many things will be left out. So Marx, I'll quote Marx, don't you say? He says that don't get into this idea of category, positivist idea of category. You have to have a spectrum of meaning, and the spectrum keeps expanding. So don't worry about definition too much. So I think Prachi, I'll begin with Prachi. The Purupach is shallow. I do accept it. Sorry, it was Prachi's argument?
Yes.
So yes, I think that I need to concentrate on that. My Purupach at the moment is not West within quote, but the modernity, the modern West. The modern West has a problem, and I'm not saying it. The Western philosophers, geographically located Western probably, Zizek and Roy Bhaskar, everybody is coming and shouting that West is in crisis. The root of the crisis, I guess, is modernity, modernism, modernization, capitalism. See, modernity, modernization and modernism, they come to us as single category. I remember Roy Bhaskar telling me that, why are you putting them together? I said, I received them together, therefore I'm putting them together. This is your category, I've received them through colonialism only. But I think there is a problem there. For instance, one category is greed. Now, greed is fundamental to capitalism. There was a long poem written in 16th, 17th century, which for the first time justified greed, said greed is good. And after that, Adam Smith wrote his Wealth of Nations. Now they are realizing, if you look at the 2008 report on capitalist crisis, they are saying the fundamental reason for this crisis is greed. So John Keane is writing now that greed is dead. So these kind of categories, I think we have to locate when we are talking the Purupach. But I do agree there is a scope still to go thicker in that. The nature of Hindi language we can discuss. I think I'm not so much on the language. So liberation theology, how much it could be successful today? I think my understanding is that liberation theology essentially is an idea articulated by Indian thinkers during their anti-colonial struggle. Look at Gandhi, look at Hind Swaraj and his argument on religion. Look at Ambedkar, the most profound liberation theologist in contemporary times is Ambedkar, who is very clearly saying that religion is essential for society, but we have to understand there's a religion of principles and religion of rules. I think there's nothing better than that. That summarizes the entire argument produced in Latin America on this. I don't have any evidence to suggest that Latin Americans got this idea from Indian freedom struggle, but there could be some idea on that. One thing is coming up again and again, that is what Varun said, emergentism and eclecticism. There's a difference between that. I am not an eclectical philosopher, not at all. If somebody is getting Ram, if you are getting that I'm eclectical and trying to do goody-goody things, I'm sorry. I'm making people absolutely uncomfortable, and I would be very happy if I make everybody very uncomfortable. I think what I'm suggesting is that there's a need to have a dialogue, and in dialogue, we will have to be absolutely honest and but respectful, critical but respectful. And that comes to me from famous philosophy called Anekantvad. Anekantvad is an invitation for dialogue, emerged at a time when there was a major philosophical and political conflict. Imagine 3 philosophers, advisors to 3 different kings, and the king of Magad was supported by the materialist philosopher, and he proposed. His Mantri suggested that if you marry a young girl, you will live longer. And he proposed Vaishali's king that why don't you marry your daughter to me? Now Vaishali was thinking of a world without violence, and Magad was extremely violent people. Attacked Vaishali, destroyed democracy completely. So that was the kind of time when Anekantvad emerged. And I think when I'm saying Indian knowledge system, I'm not talking of Hinduism. I think I take the clue from Tagore, and my next article is on that. Tagore writes on Ram Mohan Roy, wonderful article on Ram Mohan Roy. It has changed my perspective on Roy. He says that Indian knowledge system is like a river, and time and again their path is blocked. People like Ram Mohan Roy come and they open up paths, and then it starts flowing. And in that flow, a lot of tributary come and meet. And every time tributary sangam happens, and in that sangam, and metaphorically I am taking Dara Shiko's book, Samudra Sangam, that is about dialogue between Hinduism and Islam. So that I think is extremely important. I think a lot of people argue that this is a Hindu way of looking at things, and basically it can be part of that large identity politics thing. Thanks to Hilal, who reviewed my book for the first time, and by chance he is a Muslim. He's an old friend of mine. So people have stopped. दबी जबान में लोग बोलते हैं कि ये तो हिंदुत्व जैसा लगता है, लेकिन हिलाल ने रिव्यू कर दिया, लोगों ने बोलना बंद कर दिया है. Similarly, जैसे I'm very lucky that at least for CPS that Kaviraj has responded to my book, so people are not thinking it's a trivial book, must be something important. Thanks to Kaviraj's response. But I think that I'm talking about part and whole, constantly in dialogue, and quoting Randhir Singh on this, and quoting Marxism via Randhir Singh, Satish must be remembering, the relation between part and whole is that there is a signature of whole on the part, there is a signature of part on the whole, and the whole is constantly emerging. That emergent whole is a dialogue. I'm not a postmodernist who would say your reality is your reality, my reality is my reality. No, I will invite you for a dialogue and struggle against the thing that you are holding, try to hold myself with dignity, but I will be open to agree with you if I find it convincing, and then we will take it a larger truth. So this is constantly emerging, and I take it also from Roy Bhaskar. So it is not me, I'm saying this idea that truth, our knowledge to truth, and that is Anekantvad, is always limited. You may be correct, I may be correct. Therefore we should have Satyagraha, therefore we should have a dialogue, and in that dialogue there should be happiness in openness, that we should agree on that. Unless we agree on something, we keep engaging in dialogue, and if we agree then we change also. So it is not eclectic. What is the root, what is the reason for dialogue? Just not for the sake of dialogue. Reason for dialogue is liberation, search for liberation. So any humiliation, any structure of domination that is limiting human beings' capacity to realize themselves, that needs to be broken. The dialogue is created for that, to create a philosophy of that kind, not a philosophy of eclecticism, chalo sab log mil ke baith ke baat karte hain, not like that. I think like I treat Gandhi also not as a philosopher of peace, but a philosopher of struggle. The only difference is that he is a philosopher of peaceful struggle. Sorry, I think Varun has, give me some time.
Sure, sir.
I think, I believe that it has just opened up debate. I'm happy about it, and we can, and a lot of tasks that I can't carry, you will have to carry on. I'm already old. So, I think on engaging with other traditions and also Islamic tradition and women's question that you have raised, that we have not addressed enough. I think I'm struggling to understand how women were thinking about Indian reality. I don't believe, and believe me, Purusharth, and please take it, Purusharth doesn't mean Purush. That I hope you understand. Somebody called me that why are you calling Purusharth? It's very confusing. So hope you don't, I'm assuming that you are understanding that. So if human beings are thinking beings, then they can't be non-thinking beings. And it is not possible to stop anybody from articulating their problems, their grievances, theorizing. If human beings are theory-building beings, they also must be making theories. Probably our intellectual world has not taken those theories seriously, as they may be written in a very different form. Very recently, I have discovered somebody called Lily Ray, Savitaji, thanks to Savitaji who exposed to her writings. She was writing in early 50s. As a young lady, she wrote a book, and she did not give her name on that, because that was so volatile in a very conservative society. And interestingly, the writings of hers are very similar to somebody who got a Nobel Prize now. Very similar. Such a comparative thing is there. We are going to organize a seminar on that. So I think we have not read our women philosophers seriously. One of them I'm engaging at the moment. I mean, one I already have engaged a little bit is Madhavi Verma. Fascinating philosophers who have never read as a philosopher. Second one is Jagunisha, Aurangzeb's eldest daughter. I didn't even know about that, and many of you might not be knowing about that. That's Aurangzeb had a daughter, eldest daughter, and not only she, many of Shahzadiyas, they were very well educated, and she was definitely very well educated. And she was in prison, and she wrote around 15,000 verses in prison. Now what did she write in that? No medieval historian has told us as yet that what is the philosophy of that lady. She was a philosopher. She was trained as a philosopher. She was talking of astronomy, astrology, mathematics, whatnot. Several languages she knew. At best, what is available to us is 50 verses translated in English. That's it, out of 15,000. And a French writer's book on her, which is such a third-rate book, because it always gives 20 pages on something, then says she must have been there. So it doesn't make any sense. So probably we have never taken them seriously, and there are many such philosophers. And many such characters in novels who are philosophers. Premchand's Premashram, wife of the revolutionary, is a philosopher first rate. She is inside the family, then she decides to come out, then she articulates. Tagore's characters, so they are also philosophers. Problem with the philosophy department has been that they have taken very narrow definition of philosophy. And for a long time, political philosophers thought that India doesn't have political philosophy. Lord Bhikhu Parekh said that now I believe India has a political philosophy, but not a political theory. So if we are human beings and human beings are theory making built beings, and we don't have a theory, then I don't know what we are. So that's the tragedy. Then this Triguna thing, I think, yes, I have considered but not written in this. And this is very important, and this is connected with time and space. So Vikar and time and space. I think we can talk about this. That's very, very interesting thing. Navdarvad and Dharmik Navjagaran, and there is a very interesting point there. I think the present regimes in different parts of the world they are using religion. And they are using religion. The question is not that they are using it. The question is why are they using it and how are they using it? Why religion becomes available to them to be used. Hence to quote a socialist thinker who has said that secularism is a very comfortable word to hide behind in order to avoid talking about religion. So how can you talk about religion, secularism without talking about religion? And actually you have abandoned the agenda of religious reform. The last chapter is about that the tradition of internal critique of religion has been there in every religion. And no religion, Pradhan Sahib, you are right, no religion has been static. And thanks to Hilal who has told me this in early stage when we were working together on this idea, that no religion is static, every religion has internal critique. And the last point about Althusser. You know, this question came to me long back about human nature and Althusser's argument when I was working on liberation theology in Nicaragua, and his argument is of interpellation. Interestingly, Althusser was a great friend of Lacan. And Lacan has a very interesting theory of ego. His concept of ego is that it is always in conflict. And therefore, whenever you think human beings are just agencies, subjected, interpellated by ideological structure, at that moment you can understand that this agency is not static, it is dynamic, and it may change fundamentally. My favorite example is the film called Kashmir Mission Kashmir, when the militant gets transformed immediately. With one sentence transforms it completely. So I think that opens up Althusser's idea of human nature and tells us that Althusser probably is trying to understand one dimension of it. But that does not, and that is very important. I still find it very important, but that does not close the possibility of taking into account other aspects of human beings. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor Thakur. I mean, I have been to many book discussions, but I think this was one of the most enriching ones. I guess this will be on the top list of enriching ones where, I mean, it must have been exhausting for Professor Thakur as well to listen to 7 people and just speaking and taking the book in different directions. But I think this is the success of the book as well, where people have really read, engaged and thought about many dimensions of the book. I think the range of discussion that we had and the range of issues, I mean, and no issue was like overlapping the other. We were not making the same points. I think that is one of the, I mean, a good book is that it invites readers to read it differently, and I think in that sense this book has been very successful. I congratulate Professor Thakur once again. I thank all the discussants who read the book and come here and discuss the book. I thank Professor Pradhan especially because it was in a very short time that he agreed to do this. Pankaj is back here. Obviously, he won't be part of the discussion. And there is tea and snacks outside. Also, on 19th, we are having another book discussion on Professor Anupama Roy's book on citizenship regimes. The author, Professor Anupama Roy, would be there. The discussions include Rudro Bura from IIT Delhi.